All right, this is my first time going live and trying to figure out the OBS studio. I have downloaded a bunch of new softwares. So, this is a really trial and error run here. I'm going to see if I'm actually live first. I think I finally got my mic set up so that you can actually hear me. My first run was unsuccessful. The microphone was not even connected. So I am just going to see if I am actually live first and what it actually looks like on my screen. All right, so that is not what I'm seeing for some reason. All right, so this is definitely new for me. And at least you can see. Okay. I'm not really sure why my video. Excuse me. I cannot stand using new software. And it takes me a while to get it. I'm impatient in the beginning. And once I get that all figured out, normally I master it. So, all right. I'm getting ahead of myself. All right, so I've got two screens going on here. I realized using OBS Studio, you have to have two screens set up. So that's exciting. I thankfully had an extra TV screen. All right, so this video is about the baby boomers. I am going through the generations non-astrologically and astrologically. So I'm combining many systems together per usual. And I'm going to start with an introduction. Now I've got probably, I can't remember how many exact pages I have in this book, probably at least 60 pages. So this is like a presentation style. I like these types of presentations where you can actually see what the person is going from, and I will have this book for sale on my website. All right, so the baby boomer generation didn't just shape modern society. They built the emotional, economic, and psychological architecture the rest of us were born into. Born after World War II, boomers inherited a world obsessed with stability, growth, and order, but also deeply shaped by unprocessed trauma, rigid roles, and survival-based values. This generation was taught that security mattered more than emotional expression, productivity defined worth, sacrifice was virtue, and questioning the system was dangerous. And while many boomers worked incredibly hard, raised families, and contributed real value, they were also conditioned inside systems that rewarded endurance, not regulation. So I am getting deeply into polarity, the masculine and feminine individually and collectively. So I'm extremely interested in how polarity plays out in relationships, individuals, on a collective scale as well. As well, I get into personalities astro-psychologically too. So, but yeah, I'm deep into the generations right now. I have already gone over. I'm going to have to. This is a learning curve for me. I had to restart my computer. I am also downloading Adobe Creative Cloud. I'm going to make an introduction video for all of my videos. So I have done a lot of software updating on my computer, and it is just so annoying for my Aries rising. I'm very impatient at first. I'm pulling up my generations key. Okay. Nope, that's not the right one. Master key. I'm going to go through the dates on the generations real quick, if I can find it. There it is, the master key. All right, so I've already made a video on the silent generation. They were born 1928 through 1945. I certainly got a little bit emotional because my grandfather has passed away on my Native American side, and I reopened up his birth chart and tuned into his energy, and that certainly made me a little emotional. So now this one is about the baby boomers born 1946 through 1964. And then I'm going to get into the Generation X, born 1965 through 1980, my dad's era. Millennials, born 1981 through 1996. I myself am a millennial. Generation Z, born 1997 through 2012. And then I will do a video on Generation Alpha, born 2013 through 2025. All right, so that is the plan. I'm trying to figure out how to toggle between so many different things. I had my chat popped up somewhere and I don't, oh, there it is. Okay. All right, so yes, all brand new. All right, so those are the generations by years. And I was doing my introduction. So when people say, why do boomers seem so resistant to change? Or why do conversations across generations feel impossible? The answer isn't simple blame, it's conditioning. So in this video, we're not here to attack the baby boomers, and we're not here to excuse harm either. We're here to understand what they inherited, what they were never taught, what was lost somatically, emotionally, and relationally, and how that legacy still echoes through families, politics, money, work, and identity today. I definitely need to get a corded earbuds or whatever you call them so I can make sure my audio is working. That's what a lot of professional seasoned YouTubers do. I am slowly getting there. All right, so where was I? All right, healing doesn't begin with blame, it begins with context. And if we want to move forward as a collective, we have to be honest about where we started. So I do not subscribe to the blame game. All right, I'm going to keep my YouTube up on my phone. I can now use my phone as a tool here because I'm using my computer video camera, which is not as crispy. It's not as crispy as my phone. So I'm not sure how I'm going to like this presentation style, but I'm going to go for it. All right, so baby boomers. All right, so the chapters, I'm going to go over the chapters real quick, and I know you can't see this very well. Let me blow it up. All right, so the master structure. I'm going to wait. My phone's lagged out a little bit. Okay, so you can see that pretty well. All right, great. Awesome. I'm excited. All right, so the master structure part 1. So part 1 is a non-astrological external history of this generation, baby boomers, 1946 through 1964. So the pillars we are going to talk about is economy, war, politics, and authority, education, religion and morality, technology and medicine, marriage and gender roles, music and culture, and media, the 9 pillars of society. And then part 2 will be dealing with internal imprinting. This is where astrology comes in. So this is really actually kind of fascinating because on my OBS screen, it looks super, uh, like I can't read the text, but when I'm looking on my phone, it actually shows up better. So that's awesome. That is awesome. And eventually I will be able to, when I start getting people talking in the chat, I will actually put that on the screen as I live stream. But I don't have to worry about that right now, thankfully. All right, so the internal imprint, the astrological portion, we're going to talk about Pluto, what couldn't be avoided, real life polarity dynamics in relationships, how the boomer generation relationships were like, Neptune, how reality was softened and escaped, Uranus, what destabilized safety. So this is a collective video generationally. Chiron, where identity fractured, Earth, what was lost semantically. No one in astrology talks about Earth. And I think that's extremely important. Human design, I study human design, and human design actually adds Earth in with your individual chart, which I think is amazing. I don't think astrologers realize how important Earth is, as well as the asteroids. So I am doing something. I am trying to reintegrate the feminine polarity. Honestly, the feminine has not been integrated historically on all fronts. All fronts, you name it, every single pillar in society, the feminine has not been integrated. It was lost, it was repressed, etc., etc. I'm sure you've heard the story by now, or at least in your gut intuit that. So it's extremely important. That's why I am breaking things down in polarity dynamics with everything I talk about. I'm integrating Earth, the somatic embodiment, as well as indigenous teachings. I don't go through indigenous teachings here. Actually, I did add it. You're lucky. I actually did add the indigenous teachings. Hopefully, I believe. I've been doing a lot of work. All right, and then part 3 is the transmission. What the generation passed down to the younger generations below them. So, part 1. External conditioning, the world they were born into. No astrology, no interpretation yet, just facts and dates. If you are not into astrology, you can hightail it out the door after this section. That's fine with me. If you are into astrology, that will be part 2, the internal imprint, how the world was wired, how the world wired the nervous system in that generation. All right, so starting with part 1. And my phone is lagged out. I'm going to wait just a second to see. All right, so I'm going to take a drink actually real quick before I really get into this, because this is going to be a long video. This is awesome. I love this setup. I'm extremely impatient when I upload or download, new software programs. I've been using the same Viva video editing software program on my phone for probably 12 years or however long it's been out. And so this is definitely a learning curve for me. All right, so practice makes perfect. All right, so pillars we cover. I've already gone through that. So each pillar answers one question. What did daily life train the nervous system to expect? All right, so part 1 of external history. What daily life trained their nervous system to expect? All right, so pillar 1 is the economy. Stability through growth, comfort through consumption. And actually, I want to move this up a little bit so I'm not slouching over. Need to get my back up a little more. Oh, there we go. Much better. All right, so stability through growth, comfort comfort through consumption. Historical conditions, 1946 through 1964 was the long post-war boom. U.S. GDP and wages rose steadily. Union jobs provided pensions, healthcare, and predictable careers. One income could often support a household. The United States entered an unprecedented period of sustained economic growth, predictable long-term careers. For families, one income could support an entire household. Wouldn't that be great? Employment was not just work, it was guaranteed. The GI Bill in 1944 ripple effects through the 1950s and 60s, tuition assistance, housing loans, and business funding for veterans. Higher education became structurally attainable for millions of men. College expanded to absorb returning soldiers. Home ownership surged. Suburban expansion, Levitt towns and mass suburban housing normalized. Nuclear families, car dependency, and commuting to stable, centralized jobs. The consumer economy explodes. Refrigerators, televisions, cars, washing machines, and appliances became standard household items. Advertising reframes consumption as success, happiness, and moral progress. Ownership becomes identity. So, what daily life trained implicitly, not consciously? Security is external and material. Stability comes from conscious growth, not adaptability. See, I'm going to have issues now and then with where, oops, my video. I don't know if that actually changes. Give me 1 second here. I want to see if I can move my video. All right, the whole world's going to shift. Yeah, it should be moving and it's not, and I'm not really sure why, which is odd. That's going to drive me insane. Give me 1 second. It was working yesterday, and today, for some reason, it is not. So I am going to take a brief technological issues break. Studio mode didn't hit transition. Bottom right. Studio mode. All right, I'm moving my screen. You're going to look at my lap for a minute. Excuse me. All right, studio mode. Where is that at? Bottom right, studio mode is on. Oh, it is on. Great. The video is moving on the left, but frozen on the right. It's not frozen. Transition. Hit transition. How do I do that? Settings. Honestly, I'm not sure. All right, I think I figured it out. Just give me a moment. You're staring at my heating blanket. Excuse me. Well, I could probably put this up because now I know what I'm looking for. Between them is the magic. Oh, I found it. Transition. Oh, yay. I fixed it. Okay. Yes, this is exciting. This is all new for me for those of you that are joining. OBS Studio is absolutely new for me. So, okay. I think now I've got it. I'm going to take a quick drink break. I might actually delete this whole video. It's fun. I'm a rookie in OBS Studio. I literally just downloaded it 2 days ago. Okay. So I got it where I want it. Okay, great. So where were we? Okay, awesome. Technologically not savvy. All right, so we were in. I need to click off of this. It's going to drive me insane. Okay. So what daily life trained? Security is external and material. Stability comes from continuous growth, not adaptability for the boomers, 1946 through 1964. Work is not just what you do, it is who you are. Oh, you can see my mouse too. Ha. Comfort is something you acquire, not something you regulate internally. Systems are trusted to function if followed correctly. Institutions are assumed to be benevolent and permanent. Life trains compliance by rewarding it. Nervous system, expectation, the imprint. If I do what's expected, life should work. Translated semantically. Predictability equals safety. Disruption equals threat. Questioning the system equals unnecessary risk. This creates a generation that trusts institutions over intuition, equates worth with productivity, experiences deep confusion and betrayal when systems fail. This wasn't naivete, it was conditioning. The systems did work long enough to wire the expectation that it always would. All right, so global position and empire context. So we are expanding this pillar out. So the US economy didn't grow in isolation. It grew because every other industrial power was destroyed. Europe and Japan were rebuilding from rubble. The US emerged as the dominant manufacturing power, the world's creditor, the reserve currency issuer, Bretton Woods system. American factories supplied the world. Why it matters. Boomers were raised inside a temporary global monopoly, but experienced it as a permanent moral truth. Nervous system imprint. We are stable because we are good, hardworking, and correct, not because conditions are uniquely favorable. This is foundational to later generational conflict. Cheap energy and the illusion of endless growth. Energy was abundant, cheap, and unquestioned. Oil was inexpensive and plentiful. Suburban sprawl depended on cars, highways, long commutes. Growth models assumed infinite resources. Why it matters. Boomer economics trained a worldview where expansion was normal, contradiction felt like failure. Limits were moralized. You didn't try hard enough. Nervous system imprint. If things slow down, someone must be doing something wrong. This later becomes hostility towards the younger generations experiencing scarcity. All right, debt, credit, debt, and delayed consequences. Early boomers grew up before the bill came due. National debt existed, but consequences were deferred. Social programs expanded without immediate visible cost. Environmental damage was externalized and unseen. Financialization had not yet hollowed out wages. Why it matters. Boomers internalized results without reckoning. Nervous system imprint. Systems absorb cost. Individuals reap reward. This collapse. I'm having difficulties. This collapses in Gen X and fully breaks in millennials. And then we are expanding out labor power. So this is crucial. Unions gave workers bargaining power, predictable wages, healthcare tied to employment. Labor was respected because it was scarce and organized. Why it matters. Boomers were trained to believe loyalty is rewarded. Institutions reciprocate commitment. When unions collapse later, younger generations are told to keep the same loyalty without the same protections. Nervous system imprint. Play by the rules and the system will take care of you. This becomes a rage when it stops being true. Oh, this is so exciting. I'm so happy this is working. All right, emotional and psychological absence, the shadow. Material comfort replaced emotional literacy. Fathers absent due to work, mothers overburdened by domestic isolation, children materially provided for but emotionally unattended. Why it matters. The economy didn't just produce goods, it suppressed feeling. Nervous system training. Discomfort is solved externally. Emotions are distractions. Pain is something you work through, not feel through. This creates productivity without processing, success without intimacy. Final nervous system thesis. If I work hard, follow the rules, and don't rock the boat, the system will provide because it always has. So I'm going to turn off my heater. It's getting hot. So this explains boomer shock, boomer defensiveness, boomer resistance to systematic critique, the emotional rupture with younger generations. And at the end of each pillar, I do integrate indigenous teachings for the counterbalance of normal Western society. The indigenous people had always kept their internal masculine and feminine ways integrated, their love for themselves, each other, and the earth. So I think it's very important to see the counterbalance and how they dealt with the issues. All right, so stability came from relationship, not accumulation. Wealth was measured in food, security, kinship, strength, seasonal balance, reciprocity with land. Work followed cycles, not linear growth. Hoarding was destabilized, not protective. Nervous system expectation. If I stay in right relationship, life will sustain us. So the difference is one trains external dependence, like the normal Western world. One trains internal and relational regulation. No judgment, just contrast. All right, pillar 2, war and global threat. Danger is always possible, but managed by authority. Historical conditions. Permanent war footing. Gosh, I'm going to have issues with toggling or scrolling this. So World War II ends, but peace does not arrive. The U.S. immediately enters a Cold War, a conflict without battle lines, timelines, or closure. Military readiness becomes a permanent state, not an emergency response. So I'm going to check on my volume every now and then to make sure it's working. Okay, great. It is working. All right. So military readiness becomes a permanent state, not an emergency response. Nuclear reality becomes ambient. Atomic bombs introduce instant total annihilation as possibility. Nuclear weapons are not discussed emotionally, they're discussed strategically. I'm going to clear my throat real quick. All right, so nuclear weapons are not discussed emotionally, they're discussed strategically. Children growing up knowing the world could end in minutes, adults are not panicking, therefore, panic must be wrong. Duck and cover drills, children practice hiding under desks for nuclear blast, no explanation of survivability, just obedience. Safety is framed as procedure, not reality. The Korean War in 1950 through 1953, first limited war, sets precedent for endless military engagement, unclear objectives, ambiguous victory, reinforces the idea that war is normal and ongoing. Vietnam War, 1955 through 1975, escalation mid 1960s. First televised war. For the first time, war enters the living room. Violence is visible but still abstract. Late boomers face the draft personally. Authority begins to fracture, but fear remains. Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. 13 days where nuclear war felt imminent. Adults kept going to work. Schools remained open. Life continues. This trains a powerful lesson. Existential terror does not interrupt responsibility. What daily life trained? Catastrophic threat can coexist with normal routines. Fear is not something you express, it's something you manage privately. Safety comes from military strength, obedience, national unity. Authority figures, government and military and presidents are positioned as emotional regulators. Questioning a leadership feels equivalent to inviting chaos or destruction. Stability is maintained through performance, not processing. Children learn adults are calm, therefore, danger must be under control. If adults aren't talking about fear, fear must be inappropriate. If systems say we're safe, we act safe regardless of reality. So, key features: war never stops, it just becomes normalized. There is always an enemy, a threat, a reason to stay vigilant. But because nothing happens, the nervous system adapts by flattening. Hypervigilance is absorbed into daily life. Training: live as if things are fine. Trust authority to handle the unimaginable. Suppress emotional response to existential risk. Emotional and psychological shadow. Chronic low-grade fear becomes baseline. Anxiety is displaced into work, productivity, patriotism, rule following. Emotional expression is seen as destabilizing, selfish, dangerous in times of threat. This produces adults who equate calm with correctness, distrust of emotional language, resistance to systemic critique. This keeps us safe. So, the nervous system impact, I'm all over the place. Instead of just this world is dangerous, but as long as we trust authority, follow rules, and don't disrupt order, someone in charge will keep catastrophe at bay. Why this matters downstream. This is why later generations experience boomers as dismissive of existential anxiety, intolerant of emotional processing. I've got to let go of my keypad. Intolerant of emotional processing, overly trusting of institutions, hostile to disruption even when systems are failing. Because for boomers, disruption isn't signal progress, it signals annihilation. Every generation has lived with war, but the era, so the silent generation, the war style was total war. The nervous system effect was silence plus endurance. The boomers had the Cold War style, and performance under threat was the nervous system effect. Gen X, the institutional decay in Generation X was the war style. Nervous system effect was detachment. Millennials, endless war. I am a millennial. I can tell you it's been absolute endless war. Burnout and meaning collapse is the nervous system effect. Gen Z, we have moral plus information war, which caused anxiety and disassociation. And then we have Gen Alpha, reality war, identity instability. War is no longer episodic. War is environmental. War is psychological, economic, moral, and digital. War never ended. It moved into economies, information, morality, and the nervous system itself. So, why this matters? So, this validates everything we're doing here. Why embodiment matters now. Why Earth, somatic repair is the missing planet. Cannot stress that enough. I surely do appreciate astrologers, but not mentioning Earth is not helping the collective. And I do appreciate Stephen Burns. He is a geophysicist on YouTube. If you are interested in how Earth responds to solar flares and what is outside of our solar system and how real this really is. I mean, this isn't just psychology or astrology, this is real life. Everything is connected. I'm not going to sit here and preach too much. You can do your own research, but if you are wanting to get connected back to Earth in that understanding of, astronomy and astrology, listen to Stephen Burns. He has high credentials. He is very entertaining, and it's very visual on his YouTube, how he does his presentations. So another reason why I got OBS Studio, due to Stephen Burns, and Ian Carroll was actually the one that told me to get to download OBS and how to do a better presentation format. So thank you to both of them for being so very inspiring. All right, so why younger generations aren't weak, they're overloaded. Why healing is not individual anymore, it is generational. All right, so now we're going to integrate the indigenous societies related to war structurally, not romantically. So, across many land based cultures, war was not constant background noise. And I am teaching indigenous teachings because I've done a hell of a lot of generational trauma work. My great aunt died on my Native American side back in March. That sent me down a huge multi month, about 6 or 7 month studies into genealogy. And so I have done a heck of a lot of like a professional level style work on tracing my ancestors and getting multi tribal cards where we are affiliated. My family is affiliated with 4 different tribes. And so I am not only doing that work, I am integrating it into every part of my teachings. So it's extremely important. I was raised Catholic, but my spirit and soul are certainly a Native American, and I'm a farm kid. I grew up on the farm, so earth is important seasonally in every other direction. So we need to get grounded. That is the answer. We are in the Aquarian age. We have Pluto in Aquarius. We have Saturn and Neptune in the final degrees of Pisces. And so next year, 2026, we are going to be moving into a lot of fiery. The time itself is going to speed up. And so I am hitting the ground running in 2025 just to hit the wave and continue on in 2026. So all right, so across many land based cultures, war was not constant background noise. It was episodic, bounded, and purposeful. It was treated as a last resort disruption, not a permanent condition. Most conflicts were territorial, defensive, limited in scope, and governed by protocol. War was not abstract. Gosh, it's huge. It was local, visible, and costly to everyone involved. Key regulatory differences. Modern industrial war trained distance from violence, television, radio, and abstraction, obedience to centralized authority. So, the age of Aquarius, we are decentralizing every pillar of authority. News, obviously, I haven't watched mainstream news in 20 years. So you're just kind of seeing society. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, but you're really starting to see society shift. I mean, like the collective is actually seeing society shift. So it's a decentralized. It's more about networking, doing your own research, and being your own authority in the age of Aquarius. So trust in leaders to handle threat. Chronic background fear without agency. Indigenous war orientation trained direct awareness of consequences, accountability to land and kin. And I never I was raised half and half with my Native American side, and my Catholic side. But regardless, both sides of my family, they farmed and they were very connected to the land. And so I've never, ever fallen away from that. And my life is very slow paced compared to most. I have peace. And so I feel extremely responsible for teaching and hopefully helping people ground themselves in this Aquarian age. I do have an Aquarius Mercury 11th house, so the Aquarian age excites me, but I know that it is totally, dysregulating people's systems. And yeah, it's just important to go back in time and understand the timeline throughout history, technology, education, religion, politics, you name it. I think it's very important to understand what each generation went through, on all of those levels, as well as what they passed down to younger generations and where we are at now. So, indigenous war orientation trained direct awareness of consequences. Okay, so I just said that. Role of warriors in the indigenous. So, in many indigenous cultures, warriors were not rulers. Warriors did not govern society. Warriors were bound by elders, spiritual law, community accountability. War leaders were temporary. Authority returned to elders after conflict. So I'm just so worried about the younger generations. Like, the elders are dying out. Um, my grandparents, really grew up with my grandparents most of the time, and they're 81 years old. And so they're getting older, and I'm just very, very, very concerned. The gap between the silent generation and the baby boomers, and then the rest is just, I'm a millennial. I've gone through a lot of technology evolution, and we're a bridge generation, and the old ways are just really dying out. The old wisdom is dying out, and I am extremely concerned. Very concerned. I can see it. I actually work in a union, and I can see it in skilled trades. The gap is like all the old skilled tradesmen are retiring, and there's like a huge gap in between the older and the newer, they just don't have the work ethic or the wisdom that the older skilled trades have. And I see it. I see it at work, and I'm just it's some of them you hoard information and they retire with that information, and they don't pass it down because they think it's hysterical that younger generations don't think like they do, work like they do. I am an Aquarian mind. I totally believe in passing down information because that's what keeps, networks healthy. It's what keeps us healthy. I don't believe in hoarding information. I don't really think it's funny either. All right, so this prevented militarization of daily life, permanent fear states, identity being built around enemies. So, grief as regulation. I do talk about grief. I think it's extremely important. I am very Capricorn stellium. Um, I am very logical. I am pretty masculine. I have a very hard time being emotional. 2025 has been the absolute most emotional year of my life expressively. And, I really sat here and wanted to know how, the indigenous peoples dealt with grief. And I'm realizing that it is important, extremely important to move emotions. And yeah, so it's a part of embodiment. It is a part of um, healthy integration, honestly. So after conflict, grief was communal. Losses were named, rituals restored balance, violence was mourned, not celebrated. This allowed the nervous system to exit survival mode, metabolize fear, and return to relational life. Modern systems removed this phase. We are all bound up with emotions. Indigenous nervous system expectation. Threat may arise, but it must be faced directly, contained quickly, and resolved so life can continue. Contrast with the boomer imprint. Boomer era war conditioning taught threat is permanent. Safety comes from power. Fear is normalized. War never truly ends. It just pauses. So that is, they started showing war on TV and it just has never ended. And that is just insanely sad. Extremely sad. I just have never even really looked at it. And looking at it now, I'm like, wow. It's true. Indigenous conditioning taught threat is situational. Safety comes from relationship and boundaries. Fear must be discharged. War must end for life to remain viable. The core divergence. Industrial societies normalized permanent war as background noise, while indigenous cultures treated war as a temporary rupture that had to be closed for life to continue. All right, so now we're on to the third pillar, politics and authority, and I'm going to take a quick drink break. So this might be a 2-hour video. It's going to be a long one. And yes, if you would prefer to read this, I have not yet uploaded it on my website, but I certainly will do that after this video. So you can read it on your own time. I love reading. So, politics and authority, hope followed by betrayal. Historical conditions, what was actually happening. Post-war political atmosphere, late 1940s through the 1950s. The U.S. emerged from World War II as a global superpower. Government was largely trusted. Authority was associated with protection, prosperity, moral leadership. Presidents, institutions, and media were viewed as stabilizing forces. For early boomers, authority still felt parental, something that takes care of you. The rise of idealism. In 1960, election of JFK, John F. Kennedy, youngest elected U.S. president at the time, charismatic, articulate, and future-oriented, framed politics as service, inspiration, progress, and language of hope, possibility, and collective purpose. What was trained, authority can be visionary, leadership can feel exciting, the future can be designed intentionally. This was a high watermark of trust for the boomer nervous system. The shattering of trust. In 1963, assassination of JFK. First televised national political trauma. Children watched adults grieve in real time. No clear resolution or emotional processing afterwards. So in 1963, JFK was assassinated. Didn't want to go through the Charlie Kirk rabbit hole, but I certainly have. And wow, has technology changed? I will just put it that way. And it just, these two parallel deeply. All right, so what was trained? Leaders can disappear instantly. Safety is fragile. The system does not protect its own figureheads. This is where innocence collapses. The civil rights era, moral progress meets institutional resistance. Civil rights movement in 1950s through the 1960s. Segregation exposed as systemic injustice. Nonviolent protest confronts state power. Key legislation in 1964, Civil Rights Act, 1965, Voting Rights Act. Contradiction boomers absorbed. The system says it stands for equality, but only changes under extreme pressure. What is trained? Justice requires disruption. Authority resists change, even when morally wrong. Progress is slow, conditional, and incomplete. Hope and delusionment coexisted. So I love that you can actually see the text. I might need to blow it up a little bit more, but it looks to me like you can see the text pretty well, so that is great. I kind of want to blow it up a little more. I don't know if I can. Oh no, I can't actually. I've got it all the way blown up. Okay, so trial and error here. This is all new for me. Oh yes, I can. Okay, great. It started raining. Okay, so the collapse accelerates late 1960s. 1968, assassinations of Martin Luther King on April 1968. Robert F. Kennedy, June of 1968. Two moral leaders silenced within months. Simultaneous unrest and anti-war protests, racial violence, National Guard mobilizes. Political conventions turning chaotic. What this trained? Speaking truth can get you killed. Power protects itself. Moral leadership is dangerous. Authority no longer felt parental, it felt self-serving. So, the JFK, it's unreal. That's unreal. JFK in 1968, the dream dies. So, this all happened in the baby boomer generation. It's wild. Like, I couldn't stand history. I still cannot stand war and history. I am like so forcing myself to study into this because it's important on the grander scale. It's just wild. So JFK, 1963, the dream dies. Charisma, future youthful leadership, national optimism, gone in an instant. MLK, 1968, the moral compass is killed. Love, justice, nonviolence, conscious, removed. RFK, 1968, the repair path is cut off. He was the bridge between the dream and structural reform. So for boomers, the nervous system learns something brutal and specific. Hope appears, then it gets taken out. Not once, but 3 times in 5 years. That's why boomer authority wounds are not just about control, they're about grief that never got metabolized. And why later generations inherited skepticism, distrust, sarcasm, anti-idealism, and don't get your hopes up. Early seeds of institutional distrust. Late 1960s through the early 1970s. Vietnam War credibility gaps, government misinformation, surveillance of activists, FBI and CIA, abuses later exposed. Even before Watergate, the institution of betrayal had already set in. What daily life trained. Boomers often unconsciously. I'm going to try to move this. Oh, yeah, it worked. Okay. So, all right. So, did I move it too far? Mm-mm. Oh, I got it so good. I second guessed myself. So, what daily life trained? Boomers learned often unconsciously. Authority can inspire and betray. Charisma does not equal integrity. Institutions talk morality but move strategically. Trust must be conditional. Loyalty may not be reciprocated. This created a split imprint, longing for visionary leadership paired with chronic skepticism. So, nervous system conditioning. This era trained a very specific internal posture. Stay engaged but guarded, believe but verify, hope but don't relax, attached to ideals, not institutions. The body learned to live in tension, open enough to care, closed enough to survive disappointment. Nervous system expectation. Leadership can guide us, but only temporary. Eventually, we must protect ourselves from it. Why this matters downstream. This is why boomers oscillate between authority, worship, and rebellion. Gen X defaults to cynicism. Millennials distrust institutions but crave ethical leadership. Gen Z bypasses hierarchy altogether. This pillar is the origin of modern authority confusion. Indigenous counterpoint to authority. Leadership as responsibility, not dominance. While baby boomers were being trained inside centralized, charismatic, hierarchical authority, indigenous societies across North America and globally operated from a fundamentally different political architecture. Not perfect, not utopia, but structurally different, and that difference matters. Indigenous authority model core principles. Authority was relational. I'm going to have to get comfortable. Oh, there we go. Authority was relational, not obsolete. Leadership was typically earned, not assumed, temporary, not permanent, accountable to the people, the land, and future generations. I just literally lectured my daughter, my oldest daughter, almost 16 years old. I was lecturing her on how, just people are not thinking generationally ahead and haven't for a long time. It's just so sad. Based on wisdom, restraint, and service, not charisma. Power flowed from the community upward, not from the state downward. Leadership was a role, not an identity. I am struggling with this scrolling. Go up. In many native governance systems, chiefs were not kings. Leaders could be removed. Decisions were often made by councils. Elders held moral authority, not coercive power. A leader's role was to listen deeply, maintain balance, protect the people without dominating them, act in alignment with the land and ancestors. Authority did not mean I command. Authority meant I am responsible. Contrast with boomer political conditioning. Boomer authority training. Authority equals centralized, charismatic individuals, permanence, protection from threat, obedience during crisis. Indigenous authority training. Authority equals decentralized, collective wisdom, impermanence, relationship to land and people, accountability, not obedience. Boomers were taught trust leadership to keep you safe. Indigenous systems taught safety comes from balance, not control. How indigenous cultures related to power and crisis. During threat, decision-making slowed, not accelerated. Elders were consulted. The long-term impact was considered, often 7 generations ahead. The long-term impact was considered often 7 generations ahead. Imagine that thinking. Emotional regulation was collective, not suppressed. Ceremony processed grief instead of postponing it. There was no expectation that one leader could save everyone. I don't understand why people think that, our president can actually do much. It is, I'm trying not to fall down rabbit holes, but yeah, it's just, even our president, his hands are tied with military industrial complex and corporate control, corporate capture. We are entirely gridlocked in our government. It is really wild. And gridlock would have never happened if we actually had true wisdom. All right, so there's no expectation that one leader could save everyone. Violence was the first solution. Silence equaled loyalty. Indigenous view of betrayal as authority collapse. In indigenous systems, authority failing did not collapse the entire worldview. In indigenous systems, authority failing did not collapse their entire worldview, because authority was never absolute to begin with. In boomer systems, authority was centralized and idealized. When it failed, assassinations, war lies, and repression, the entire structure fractured. Betrayal felt existential. This is a critical distinction. Boomers experienced if leadership fails, everything fails. Indigenous cultures understood leaders come and go, the people and land endure. Nervous system implications. Boomer nervous system. Vigilant, guarded, trust oscillates between hope and disillusionment, carries unresolved betrayal. Indigenous nervous system. Grounded in continuity, less dependent on individual leaders, grief processed communally, authority not internalized as safety. One system externalizes safety, the other embedded it. Why this counterpoint matters now. As centralized authority collapses again, we have Pluto and Aquarius era, the age of Aquarius. The indigenous model is not nostalgia, it's instruction. It offers decentralized leadership, community based authority, elder wisdom without domination, governance that includes grief, land, and time. Not as replacement ideology, but as regulating template for what comes next. Boomers were taught to trust leaders to protect them. Indigenous cultures were taught to trust balance to sustain them. All right, so now we're getting into the educational pillar in society, external generation of the baby boomers, 1946 through 1964, what shaped them educationally. Everyone goes to school and school makes citizens. Historical conditions, post-war pressure. 1946 through 1964, the baby boom created an unprecedented number of children. The U.S. built tens of thousands of new public schools in a short time. Education became a mass system, not a personalized one. I am so grateful I did go to private school for many, many years. I have lived in a hole most of my life. Oh, gosh. All right, standardization becomes the solution. Uniform curricula across districts, age-based grades, testing used to measure intelligence and compliance, efficiency prioritized over individual learning styles. This wasn't about curiosity, it was about scale. Cold War influence on schooling. Education framed as a national security issue, science, math, engineering emphasized, especially after Sputnik in 1957. Smart became synonymous with useful to the state. Schools trained future workers, soldiers, and administrators. Discipline as preparation. Corporal punishment still common. Strict rules, dress codes, and hierarchy. Speaking out of turn punished. Emotional expression treated as disruption. College as the reward structure. College attendance rose sharply. For men, college equals career pipeline. For women, college equaled refinement, teaching, nursing, or backup plan. Education was framed as the ladder, but not everyone was allowed to climb it equally. What daily life trained? There is a correct sequence: school, graduation, job, marriage, stability. Authority defines what is intelligent. Success comes from obedience, not originality. Feelings are irrelevant to performance. You are evaluated constantly. Children learned: raise your hand, sit still, don't question too much, do what's expected, and wait for permission. Creativity was tolerated only if it didn't disrupt order. Nervous system imprint. Safety comes from external approval. Worth is measured, graded, and compared. Mistakes feel dangerous. Curiosity is risky if it changes authority. Performance becomes self-regulation, excuse me. This creates a body level expectation. If I follow instructions correctly, I will be safe and rewarded. And a hidden fear: if I deviate, I could lose everything. Structural contradiction. Education promised upward mobility, fairness, and opportunity, but delivered hierarchy, sorting, pressure, and conformity. So boomers learn to trust the system and feel quietly constrained by it. This is why later generations inherit credential fatigue, distrust of institutions, resentment towards grading, testing, and authority. Confusion between intelligence and obedience. Boomer education trained citizens, not thinkers, rewarding obedience, standardizing intelligence, and tying worth to performance. So, indigenous, oop, I'm struggling with this. Indigenous counterpoint to education. Knowledge is relational, embodied, and earned through living. While Boomer era education emphasized standardization, hierarchy, and external authority, Indigenous education systems operated on a fundamentally different logic. Not better or worse, structurally different. How Indigenous education functioned broadly across many nations. Learning was lived, not abstract. Knowledge was transmitted through observation, participation, storytelling, repetition over seasons. Children learned by doing alongside elders, not by sitting apart from life. There was no separation between education, work, family, land, and spirituality. Learning happened everywhere. Authority was earned, not assigned. Elders held authority because of lived experience, proven wisdom, service to the community. No credential could replace demonstrated understanding. Knowledge was contextual. What you learned depended on your role, your gifts. Oh my God. It hits me so deep. Like the Native Americans, they would tune in to a child's energy and who they were by their nature and name them accordingly. It's just, we're so freaking ass backwards. It's insane. Okay. Sorry. That it was just very. Your gifts. It's like, God. Like astrology really allows you to look into someone's gifts, even. It's like, all right. So, not just shaping your child into who you want them to be, but, helping them be better of who they actually are. It's kind of like, hello. All right. So, your readiness. I'm trying so hard not to go through tons of just rants and raves. All right. That's why I write books and I keep very structured and organized. I don't want to rant and rave. All right, so this contrasts sharply with boomer schooling, where authority came from position, intelligence came from testing. I have a straight A student, okay? She is amazing at testing in school, but the common sense lacks. Just because you're extremely good at testing and memorizing things doesn't mean you have life common sense. It's just, and I just see that in my workplace. These people have tons of, credentials. And when it comes to working on the floor, they have no freaking clue what they are doing. And they don't know how to like gather information and communicate. It's literally comes down to work ethic, communication, and who you know. All right. So, anywho, getting fired up. My Aries rising. All right. This contrasts sharply with boomer schooling, where authority came from position. It's not real life. Intelligence came from testing, and worth came from comparison. Knowledge was not competitive. There were no grades, no ranking, no forced timelines. You weren't asked, are you smarter than them? You were asked, are you listening? Are you ready? Can you carry this responsibly? I mean, mothers know this innately. It's like you can have a 12-year-old girl and a 12-year-old boy, and their maturity levels are totally different. Mistakes were part of learning, not a threat to identity. Nervous system training indigenous model. Daily life trained a radically different expectation. You belong before you perform. Knowledge arrives when you're ready, not when you are forced. Intelligence includes emotional attunement, environmental awareness, relational skill, restraint, and humility. Learning is circular, not linear. Body level expectation, I am not guided. or I am guided, excuse me, my mind went off. I am guided, not graded. Why this matters in boomer context. By the boomer era, indigenous education systems had been actively suppressed. So yes, I'm gonna go back a little bit in time. I couldn't remember if I actually added this or not. I went back and forth, but it's important. It's a history. This history that we weren't told is extremely important. So yes, I am healing generational trauma here on my native side, and it feels so good. By the boomer era, indigenous education systems had been actively suppressed. Boarding schools forcibly removed children from families, language, land, and cultural knowledge. So while boomers were trained to become citizens of a system, indigenous children were being trained out of their own systems. God, this hits me so hard. I just you can seriously hold generational trauma 7 years back in your body, and I feel it. I truly do. So while boomers were trained to become citizens of a system, indigenous children were being trained out of their own system. This created a historical split. One model taught obedience to institutions, the other taught responsibility to community and land, and was punished for it. The hidden cost of suppressing indigenous education. When relational embodied learning is erased, intelligence becomes disembodied, authority becomes rigid, curiosity becomes dangerous, education becomes compliance. Later generations feel this as burnout, alienation from learning, distrust of schools, hunger for mentorship instead of instruction. Kitty, what are you doing? They are not rejecting learning, they are rejecting education without belonging. Boomer education trained people to succeed inside systems. Indigenous education trained people to belong inside life. Accurate historical timeline. So, the late 1800s through the early 1900s, foundational damage. Indigenous boarding schools established, US and Canada, forced removal of children from families, languages banned, cultural practices criminalized, education reframed as civilizing and assimilation. This is where the original rupture occurred. 1920s through the 1940s and the silent generation childhood. Boarding schools still active, indigenous children punished for speaking their language, traditional knowledge transmission disrupted, and intergenerational trauma set in motion. At the same time, Western schooling systems were becoming standardized and institutionalized. In 1946 through the 1964 boomer era, the split becomes invisible. By the boomer era, indigenous education systems had already been suppressed. Boarding schools were still operating. Many didn't close until the 1970s. That is crazy. Indigenous knowledge had been pushed out of public legitimacy. Meanwhile, public education expanded massively for the general population. Schooling was framed as neutral, universal, and the only way. Institutional education becomes synonymous with intelligence and citizenship. So, boomers grew up in a world when one educational model was normalized and rewarded, the other had already been erased, criminalized, or hidden. Why this matters specifically for boomers. Boomers didn't witness the destruction, they inherited the absence. That's more subtle and in some ways more powerful. They were taught institutional education is neutral, standardized knowledge is superior, embodied relational learning is primitive or irrelevant. So the split becomes invisible. The real historic split. Not boomers suppressed indigenous education. That's not what I'm saying. But boomers grew up inside a system that had already replaced indigenous knowledge with institutional authority and called it progress. Kitty, you are spoiled and don't need any more treats. And you can definitely be heard on the mic, I'm sure. Oh, this is a good break to stretch a little. It's like 5:30 in the morning. All right, I'm gonna take a coffee break since I got interrupted by Kitty. What are you doing, Andy? Alrighty. Okay, so religion and morality. Order, propriety, jeez, and virtue as social glue. Historical conditions, peak religious participation, 1950s through the early 1960s marked the highest church attendance in U.S. history. Church membership was not just spiritual, it was social belonging, reputation management, community surveillance. Being unchurched raised suspicion about character, loyalty, and values. Religion embedded in civic life. Prayer in schools was common until the early 1960s. Political speeches openly invoked God. Public morality and religious morality were largely indistinguishable. Churches functioned as moral arbiters, social anchors, and informal enforcers of norms. Cold War framing. The ideological conflict with the Soviet Union was framed not just politically, but morally. Capitalism and Christianity versus godless communism. Huge thing. I went down a huge rabbit hole with this for a few hours. So, faith became a symbol of patriotism, loyalty, righteousness. To question religious norms could feel like questioning the nation itself. Rise of evangelical revival culture. Large-scale revival meetings emphasize repentance, obedience, moral purity, clear right versus wrong. Emotional expression was only allowed within approved religious frameworks. Personal struggle was spiritualized rather than examined socially or psychologically. For some reason, this is off. I don't know what I did. Oops, maybe not. Okay. I feel like my spacing is off. Okay, so where were we? Rigid sexual and family norms. Sex outside marriage was heavily stigmatized. Divorce was socially condemned, especially for women. Pregnancy outside of marriage carried lifelong shame. Gender roles were moralized. Male authority equals God ordained. Oh, God, just zipped my mouth. Okay, I'm zipping my mouth. Female submission equals virtue. I just laugh because I was raised Catholic and my who I looked up to was the Virgin Mary. And yeah, so there's tons and tons of male, angels and God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit. And I just didn't have very many female, you've got Mary Magdalene, but I really didn't hear that much about her. Oh gosh. Okay. So I'm good. Are you good? I'm good. I'm just trying to bring the feminine back into reality here. Abuse, dissatisfaction, and emotional neglect were often hidden behind good Christian family experiences. What daily life trained morality is collective, not personal. Ethics were enforced through community consensus, not internal discernment. Right and wrong were defined externally. Goodness equals conformity. Being good meant fitting the mold, not asking disruptive questions, maintaining appearances. Moral deviation threatens social cohesion. Desire is suspect. Desire, sexual, emotional, and creativity was framed as dangerous if unchecked. Self-control was praised more than self-understanding. Inner conflict was moralized instead of explored. Authority is divinely justified. Parents, husbands, pastors, and political leaders were often treated as moral authorities by default. Questioning authority risked being labeled rebellious, sinful, or ungrateful. How morality functioned in practice. Religion operated less as a path to personal meaning and more as a behavior regulation system, a social stabilizer, a containment structure for fear, desire, and dissent. It helped maintain order in a rapidly changing world, but at the cost of emotional honesty, sexual autonomy, moral nuance, and psychological safety. Nervous system expectation. Be good, behave properly, don't disrupt order. Translation at the body level. Safety comes from compliance. Belonging requires self-monitoring. Authentic expression risks exile. Moral failures feels catastrophic, not instructional. Why this matters for the boomer imprint. This moral framework stabilizes families externally, suppressed conflict internally, rewarded appearance over truth, taught people to regulate themselves through guilt rather than awareness. It explains why many boomers equated goodness with endurance. Suffering was tolerated instead of questioned. Later generations rebelled against morality itself rather than separating ethics from control. All right, so I don't know if I want to. This is just such a. Let me sit on this for just 1 second. Okay, do I want to go down this rabbit hole? Let me see how long it is. Okay, yeah, it's important. It's a huge. If you really want to feel into the boomer era, this is huge. I almost threw someone under the bus, but I'm not going to. But it was actually extremely accurate. um, it's interesting because you can see this in parallel with something else. All right, stay on track. What godless communism actually means, historically, not rhetorically. Godless communism was a Cold War framing used primarily in the United States and allied Western nations from the late 1940s through the 1960s to define the Soviet Union and communist ideology as not just politically dangerous, but morally and spiritually threatening. It wasn't just about economics, it was about identity, morality, and existential meaning. The core idea. Communism, especially Soviet-style Marxism and Leninism, was officially atheistic. So, yeah, I'm just going to stay right on here. The state rejected organized religion. The church was stripped of authority or suppressed. Loyalty was to the state, not God. Meaning was framed through collective labor and ideology, not divine order. In response, the U.S. framed itself as the moral opposite. Oh no, I just lost my spot. Oh, great. Where is it? Moral opposite. There we go. Capitalism and Christianity equals goodness, freedom, and order. Communism and atheism equals evil, chaos, and oppression. This binary was drilled into public consciousness. Why this mattered so much to the baby boomers. Religion became a national security tool. During the early Cold War, 1954, under God was added to the U.S. Pledge of Allegiance. 1956, In God We Trust became the national motto. Church attendance was socially expected. Public religiosity signaled loyalty to the nation. Religion wasn't just spiritual anymore, it was patriotic. What daily life trained: belief equals loyalty, doubt equals danger. Morality was externalized and weaponized. Instead of asking what is right and what feels true, society taught: good people believe the right things, good families look a certain way, good citizens don't question moral authority. Religion became about order and obedience, not inner experience. Boomer nervous system training. Safety comes from aligning with approved moral structures. Emotional repression got moralized. Because communism was framed as cold, mechanical collectiveness and anti spiritual, the US doubled down on rigid gender roles, family structure, sexual restraint, and obedience to authority. Emotional restraint wasn't just practical, it was virtuous. Feeling too much, questioning too deeply, and deviating from norms could be interpreted as weakness or worse, subversion. This shaped how boomers related to authority and truth. Boomers grew up with this implicit rule: there is a correct belief system, deviating from it threatens society. That's why conformity felt safe, rebellion felt dangerous but necessary, authority carried moral weight, dissent created internal conflict. This explains why boomers were often confuse morality with order and belief with identity. They weren't taught how to discern truth internally, how to separate faith from obedience, how to tolerate ambiguity. They were taught to align, to behave, to represent goodness externally. This directly feeds into emotional suppression, rigid polarity rules, difficulty with nuance, and discomfort with newer generations questioning everything. Godless communism wasn't just a political enemy, it was a moral threat that taught an entire generation to equate obedience with goodness and belief with safety. What actually needs integrating, not fixing, not erasing. The boomer generation was trained to survive by external moral alignment. That strategy worked in a high threat, high propaganda environment. The integration is not abandoning faith, shaming religion, attacking tradition, or declaring belief systems as wrong. The integration is moving from morality from the outside back inside the body. The core fracture created by godless communism. Boomers were taught an unconscious split: external God, nation, and authority. Internal split: body, feeling, and inner truth. External split: goodness equals obedience. The internal split: desire equals danger. External split: belief equals safety. Internal split: ambiguity equals threat. Order and morality externally, and internal split is the emotion equals instability. This split kept society stable. It also cut people off from inner moral sensing. Integration goal: move morality from compliance back into embodied conscience. That's it. Everything else is downstream. 3-part integration for boomers: faith and conscience. So this is Neptune integration, which I will get to in the second part. Old wiring: good people believe right things. Integrated upgrade: good people feel into what is right. This doesn't remove faith, it personalizes it. Spirituality becomes experiential, not performative. Prayer becomes listening, not just obedience. God becomes relational, not authoritarian. Nervous system shift: safety no longer depends on external approval. Authority, integrity, the Pluto integration. Old wiring: authority must be obeyed to preserve order. Integrated upgrade: authority must earn trust through accountability. This allows leadership without domination, structure without oppression, and respect without silence. Masculine healing. Strength includes emotional availability and repair. Feminine healing support no longer requires self-erasure. And belief and embodiment, the earth integration. Old wiring, my body is dangerous, sinful, and secondary. Integrated upgrade, my body is a moral instrument. This is huge, bringing the body back into every aspect that we've been disconnected from. Because when the body is trusted, empathy returns, boundaries become clear, guilt dissolves, nervous systems regulate naturally. Somatic truth, somatic grounded embodiment with earth. Earth is your body. How can we forget? Semantic truth replaces moral rigidity. What this looks like in real life, very concrete. In relationships, saying this doesn't feel right without shame, repair instead of silent endurance, love without hierarchy. In faith, questioning without fear, belief without performance, mystery without panic. In society, respect for tradition without freezing it, moral clarity without authoritarianism, unity without uniformity. The integration isn't choosing God or rejecting God, it's reclaiming conscience from compliance. Why boomers actually do this? This matters. Boomers are not too rigid to change. Why boomers actually can do this, excuse me. They are the generation that survived a massive contradiction, lived through idealism and betrayal, witnessed authority collapse in real time, and already questioned everything at once. The integration simply asks them to finish the cycle they started: rebellion, reflection, embodiment. How this completes the larger generational arc. Silent generation learned to survive by silence. Boomers learn to survive by order. Gen X learn to survive by skepticism. Millennials learn to survive by overfunctioning. And Gen Z learn to survive by abstraction. This work restores embodied moral authority, the missing phase. Not rebellion, not compliance, but integration. All right, drink break. Then we'll go on to the indigenous counterpoint to religion and morality. I'm a Native American that was raised Catholic, and I'm just giggling at myself with all the systems that I have combined together to create this series. This is my 11th series on this channel. So I'm working on 11 different series and just rotating between the series. So, all right, ethics rooted in relationship, not obedience. So we're still in the religion and morality pillar, and at the end of every pillar, I incorporate the indigenous counterpoint because they have never lost their way like we have. So it's important to see the reflection, what indigenous moral systems were and are. Indigenous traditions across North America did not separate spirituality, morality, daily life, and community responsibility. There was no concept of church attendance as virtue, belief as proof of goodness, shame as a moral regulator. Core indigenous moral principles, generalized, not pan-tribal. So right action equals the right belief. What matters was how you lived, not what you professed. My dad was just ranting and raving. Oops, I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus. Oh, God, but he was just ranting and raving about someone acting like such a good Christian, and they had to, they were just up there preaching about how good of a Christian they are. And it's you don't have to preach what you are if you are it. Like I'm masculine, I'm macho. Like if you're actually that, you don't have to run around yelling at people about it. So it's just one of those things that makes me Laugh. So, what mattered was how you lived, not what you professed. Classic projection. Community accountability, not divine surveillance. Behavior was regulated through elders, kinship, reputation, and reciprocity, not fear of punishment from an invisible authority. Land as moral reference point. The earth. Ethics were measured against impact on the land. Boy, have we fallen away from that. Golly. I'm a farmer, so I've never fallen away from the land, but ugh. Impact on future generations, balance, not purity. No shame-based control of the body. Sexuality, desire, and embodiment were not moral failures. They were guided through rites of passage, which we do not have, which is extremely important for the masculine. For boys becoming men, we do not have any rites of passage. Women naturally already have constant humility cycles. They're women's cycles, and childbirth is an innate rite of passage for women. And yeah. So that's a big thing. Education and responsibility, not repression. Spirituality was lived, not performed. There was no separation between sacred time, work, family, rest. Life itself was ceremonial. All right, so direct contrast with Boomer era religious training. So, Boomer Christian morality versus indigenous moral framework. I think Christianity was the major religion throughout the United States. I was raised Catholic, so I'm just kind of like a little note. All right, so Boomer Christian morality. Obedience equals goodness versus responsibility equals goodness. Conformity equals virtue versus balance equals virtue. Oh no, you can't see that. Give me 1 second here. There we go. Oh, I'm loving this. All right, so shame regulates behavior. Relationship regulates behavior. Authority mediates God. Elders and land mediate wisdom. Desire is suspect. Desire is guided, not punished. Morality is abstract, and morality is situational. Why this matters in the Boomer context. By the Boomer era, indigenous spiritual systems had already been actively dismantled. Children were removed to boarding schools. Spiritual practices were criminalized. Christianity was imposed as a civilizing force. So while Boomers were taught morality keeps society stable, indigenous communities were punished for moral systems that did not rely on hierarchy, did not require shame, did not separate body from spirit, did not centralize authority. This created a moral split in the collective psyche. Nervous system impact. I'm going to take a quick little break. I'm going to check my chat actually. I certainly appreciate those who are watching me live stream my first OBS studio presentation. Thank you so much for being here. All right, so nervous system impact. Boomer religious imprint. Hypervigilance around rightness. Fear of social disruption. Suppressed desire. Externalized conscience. Yes. Indigenous moral imprint suppressed. Internal moral compass. Somatic ethics. This feels out of balance. Community regulated behavior and long view accountability. This suppression of indigenous morality removed embodied ethics from the mainstream, leaving rules without wisdom. Why later generations feel morally lost? Because they inherited shame without ceremony, rules without relationship, belief without embodiment, and authority without trust. What's returning now isn't spiritual rebellion, it's relational morality re emerging. Boomer era religion trained people to be good through obedience. Indigenous morality trained people to be good through relationship, responsibility, and balance. One system stabilized society, the other sustained life. All right, pillar 6 out of 9. I am hoping I don't lose my voice. All right, pillar 6, we have technology and medicine. And I am going to leave timestamps. I'm trying to mentally notate myself while speaking out loud. I'm going to leave timestamps because this is going to be a long video. And I'm not even sure how long I've been going. I don't see. Oh, it's been an hour and 40 minutes, actually. Is that right? Yes. Okay. So that's good. OBS tells me how long I've been going. An hour and 40 minutes. And I'm not even probably halfway through. What page am I on? 42. So yeah, I am actually halfway, I think. In an hour and 40. All right. How do I get that off? That's not good. Okay, there. Oh, this is exciting. I'm actually really excited about this. This is great. I haven't used this TV screen in forever. I bought it years ago and it's like perfect. Perfect. I had an extra one. It's great. All right. So, technology and medicine. Progress will solve problems. Historical conditions expanded. All right. Television becomes dominant. 1950s through the 1960s. By the mid 1950s, TV ownership becomes standard in United States households. Families gather around a single screen each evening. News, culture, morality, and authority are mediated through a centralized voice. Result, reality becomes shared, curated, and externally narrated. The space race in 1957 through 1969. 1957, Sputnik launches. Technological shock to U.S. identity. Massive federal investment in science, engineering, and education. 1969, we had the moon landing becomes a collective triumph. Broadcasted live. Should I go down that rabbit hole? No, I won't. Hey, it was a historical event that they haven't replicated since 1969. All right. Result, technology is framed as proof of superiority, national salvation, and human destiny. Anything is possible if science is advanced enough. Medical breakthroughs, 1950s. We had 1955, the polio vaccine introduced, visible victory over disease. Antibiotics became widespread and routine. Infant mortality drops sharply. Life expectancy increases. Oh, man. Result, medicine is seen as authoritative, corrective, external, and superior to the body's own wisdom. Illness becomes something to eliminate, not understand. Household automation, washing machines, dryers, dishwashers, vacuum cleaners, labor-saving devices marketed heavily to women. But physical labor decreases, emotional labor, mental load, and relational responsibility remain invisible and unchanged. Raise the roof if you understand what I'm saying. All right, result. Effort becomes hidden, not reduced. What daily life trained? Problems are external, not internal. If something hurts, a tool, pill, or expert exists to fix it. Authority lives in doctors, scientists, engineers, broadcasters. Emotional experience is secondary to functional outcomes. The body is a machine, not a teacher. Nature is something to conquer, manage, or optimize. Nervous system training, boomer imprint. Trust systems over sensations, deferred to experts rather than inner signals. Suppress ambiguity. Clarity must come from the outside. Stay functional even if disconnected. Core expectation. Progress will fix what's broken. I don't need to feel it. This is where disassociation quietly enters, not as trauma, but as efficiency. Indigenous counterpoint to technology and medicine as relationship, not control. This is not romanticized, it's structural. Indigenous framework. Health is a balance between body, spirit, community, land. Illness is information, not failure. Healing is participatory, not outsourced. Medicine, plant, ceremony, movement, breath, and story. Each one of those words can just be broken down, and it would take me days and days and days and days and days. It's just each are their own science. It's absolutely wild. All right, let me repeat that because I don't think you heard me. Medicine, plants, ceremony, movement, breath, and story. Healer's guide, they do not override. The body is trusted as an intelligent system. Technology tools exist to support life, not dominate it. Innovation is evaluated by impact on land, impact on community, impact on future generations. If a solution disrupts harmony, it is not progress. The split this created, boomer era. While boomers were taught or were trained to believe science will save us, experts know best, and progress is linear and good, indigenous systems were dismissed as primitive, criminalized, erased from medical legitimacy, separated from land based knowledge. What do you call naturopathic doctors? So one worldview surged forward unquestioned while the other was actively silenced. Nervous system contrast. Boomer training override sensation, defer authority, trust external systems, keep moving forward. Indigenous training, listen to sensation, trust relational wisdom, slow down to restore balance, heal before advancing. Why this matters downstream. This pillar explains why boomers often struggle with chronic illness they don't emotionally understand, mistrust of somatic or emotional healing, confusion with everything is fine but nothing feels right, why later generations rebel against expert only authority, pharmaceutical dominance, productivity at all cost, health models. And why indigenous and semantic wisdom resurfaces exactly when technological faith collapses. So, clean synthesis. Boomers were taught that progress would solve problems. Indigenous systems taught that problems must be listened to before they can be healed. All right, pillar 7 out of 9, we have marriage and gender roles. Roles first, feelings second. Historical conditions. Post-war family model becomes the gold standard. Late 1940s through the early 1960s, marriage rates surge to historic highs. Median age of first marriage drops, early 20s for women and mid 20s for men. Marriage as treated as a civic duty, a stabilizing institution, a moral expectation. Clear, rigid division of labor. Men, primary breadwinners, identity tied to career, provision, and authority. Women, homemakers, mothers, emotional managers. Unpaid domestic labor, normalized and invisible. This wasn't framed as oppression at the time, it was framed as order. Economic dependence reinforces roles. Once one income often supports a household, but a woman's financial security is tied to marriage. Leaving a marriage risks poverty, social exile, and loss of status. Before the 1970s, women often couldn't open credit cards or loans independently. Career continuity after marriage or children was discouraged or blocked. Divorce is heavily stigmatized. Divorce rates were low not because marriages were healthy, but because leaving was punished. Divorce implied moral failure, instability, harm to children, and social shame, especially for women. What daily life trained? Marriage is an institution, not a place for emotional truth. Stability is more important than satisfaction. Gender roles create predictability. Predictability feels safe. Emotional mismatch, resentment, or loneliness are normal and endured. Personal fulfillment is secondary to family appearance and cohesion. Marriage becomes a container for survival, not intimacy. Nervous system expectation. Fulfill your role and the relationship will hold. Love is demonstrated through duty, endurance, provision, and sacrifice, not emotional attunement. Indigenous native counterpoint. Relationship is balance, not role performance. This is where the contrast becomes profound. Indigenous relational frameworks, broad patterns, not monolithic. Across many indigenous cultures, partnership was not defined by rigid gender scripts. Roles were complementary and situational, not hierarchical. Value was tied to contribution to community, relationship to land, responsibility to children and elders, emotional maturity and wisdom. Marriage, where it existed, was not primarily a legal contract, an economic dependency, or a moral checkpoint. It was a relational alliance. Key differences: Western boomer model, role, stability, and survival, endurance equals virtue, and leaving equals failure. Indigenous model, balance, relationship, continuity, adaptation, wisdom equals wisdom. Separation could occur without moral annihilation if balance was lost. Emotional truth was not a threat to the relationship, it was a part of maintaining harmony. Grief and mismatch were not moralized. Emotional pain and communal containers. Elders, ceremony, storytelling, and ritual helped metabolize loss. Relationships could change without erasing identity or worth. This matters because while boomers were trained to stay and suppress, indigenous systems taught people how to feel and recalibrate. Why this matters downstream: generational impact. Boomers endured emotional mismatch for stability, confused loyalty with love, mistook endurance for intimacy. Gen X felt the emotional absence but lacked language for it, learned self relevance inside relational instability, and skeptical of institutions, unsure how to replace them. Millennials reject role based marriage, seek emotional intimacy first, often lack structural containers, which causes burnout, serial relationships, and over-analysis. Gen Alpha emerging, likely to reject both. Rigid structures, unstructured emotional chaos, and they are moving towards fluid roles, coherent based partnerships, decentralization of family power, and relational sovereignty. Boomer marriage prioritized stability over intimacy and taught generations after them to either endure silently or burn everything down trying to feel. Indigenous version, Western marriage taught endurance through roles. Indigenous partnership taught balance through relationship. And the loss of the wisdom is still echoing. Pillar 8, we have music. Emotion finds a voice where society won't allow one. Historical conditions, 1950s, rock and roll breaks containment. It's rock and roll. I was actually raised a rocker and a roller. My father is one of the few rockers in my family. Although I am a country kid, I didn't like country until I was 18 years old. I grew up on rock. So, emotion finds a voice where society won't allow one. Historical conditions, 1950s, rock and roll breaks containment. Post war conformity dominates public life. Rock and roll introduces a rhythm rooted in the body, sensuality, and rebellion. Youth as a distinct identity, not just adults in training. Artists like Elvis, drawing heavily from the Black musical tradition, spark moral panic. Music becomes the first sanctioned rupture in emotional constraint. I actually think Elvis, I don't know if he, like, legitimately had Native American heritage card, like, I don't know if he practiced that, something to do with that, I haven't looked it up, but I came across that, and I thought that was very interesting. I haven't really studied into him too much, my grandma was a huge fan, but, not really my era. So, 1960s, folk and protest music, artists like Bob Dylan and Joanne Baez give language to grief, injustice, war fatigue, allow dissent without direction, confrontation. Music becomes conscience, witness, emotional truth teller. People saying what they cannot say safely. British invasion, emotional permission expands. The Beatles reshape vulnerability, longing, introspection. Men expressing emotion publicly becomes temporarily acceptable if it is musical. This subtly cracks the masculine emotional repression. Late 1960s, you had the counterculture in collective release. So, Woodstock and similar gatherings, music and drugs and bodies and community, a grief, rage, hope, and longing pour out together. Music becomes ceremony, protest, prayer, rebellion, and mourning ritual. For a brief moment, collective nervous systems exhale. What daily life trained, music becomes a safe container for forbidden emotion. Feelings can be expressed indirectly without destabilizing roles. Identity can live in sound, lyrics, rhythm, subculture. Emotional truth is permitted only when stylized, aestheticized, and separated from daily relationships. Music holds what families, churches, schools, and marriages cannot. Nervous system expectation. Emotion is acceptable in art, not always in life. So people learn to feel deeply, sing loudly, cry privately, then return to emotional restraint afterward. Music becomes regulated rebellion. So the indigenous native counterpoint to the musical pillar of the baby boomers, which, I don't really know if it's a counterpoint. It's like the only pillar that actually aligns pretty well. So, music as lived ceremony, not containment. I get that. I do get it. But yeah, music is music. My playlist, man. My playlist goes from rock and roll to heavy rock to classical music to hip hop to I've got every genre of music. My playlist is like a ride. I was always that kid back in the day, burning CDs and making the musical playlist for the workouts or pre-basketball, volleyball games. Oh, I loved it. So, music is lived ceremony, not containment. Here's the key contrast. In many indigenous cultures, music was not an outlet, it was integrated. Song, drum, chant, and dance Regulated nervous systems marked transitions, processed grief in real time, aligned community with land and season. Emotion was not displaced into art, it was held by the community. Core difference: Boomer era Western model, emotion is dangerous to order. Music acts as a pressure valve. Feel, express, suppress again. Indigenous model, emotion is information. Music keeps the body in rhythm with life. Feel, express, integrate, and continue. Music wasn't separate from life, it was life. Music is certainly life. Why this mattered so much for boomers? Because emotional expression was restricted elsewhere. Grief from war, displacement, and betrayal had no container. Institutions demanded composure. Music became the only place where rage didn't destroy reputation. Sorrow didn't threaten stability. Longing didn't destabilize marriage. And rebellion felt momentarily safe. This is why music from this era still hits so hard. It's not nostalgia, it's unfinished emotional processing. Downstream generational echo. Boomers felt deeply through music, lived shallowly in daily emotional expression, often confused emotional intensity with intimacy. Gen X inherits irony, detachment, grunge, and cynicism. Emotion is present but armored. Millennials try to live inside emotional truth, lacks shared ritual containers, and burns out trying to be the ceremony. Gen Alpha likely to reintegrate music, emotion, and embodiment. Less separation between art, identity, and the nervous system regulation. So, boomer music carried the emotions society couldn't hold, which is why these songs still feel alive, while the structures around them collapse. Where indigenous cultures use music to integrate emotion into life, boomers used music to survive emotional suppression and passed the unprocessed grief forward. All right, we're at the final pillar of section 1. Culture and media, image, aspiration, and conformity. Historical conditions, post war advertising boom, Madison Avenue rises as a cultural force. Advertising doesn't just sell products, it sells identity. Happiness, success, and morality are visually branded. Suburban nuclear family idealized. Television normalizes a very specific life template. Married heterosexual couple, single family home, gendered domestic roles. Anything outside this frame is portrayed as dysfunctional or dangerous. Teenagers become a market category 1950s onward. Youth identity is monetized for the first time. Music, fashion, cars, and attitudes are packaged as rebellion, but safely consumable. Television creates a sharp reality. Limited channels equals unified narrative. The same images, values, and aspirations are reinforced nightly. Disruption shown but contained. Civic rights protests, Vietnam footage, assassinations appear on TV, but always framed by authority, anchors, and institutional language. What daily life trained? Identity is something you present, not something you explore. Belonging requires visual conformity. Aspiration must be legible to others. Emotional complexity is acceptable only if aesthetically packaged. Difference is tolerated when it can be commercialized. Key feature: culture teaches how to look stable, not how to feel whole. Nervous system expectation: be seen the right way or risk exclusion. Indigenous counterpoint: culture as belonging, not performance. In indigenous frameworks, identity is relational, not performative. Belonging comes from kinship, land relationship. contribution to the community. There is no ideal image to maintain. Only right relationship to people, place, and responsibility. Elders are honored for wisdom, not visibility. Expression is seasonal, ceremonial, and embodied, not constant. Contrast created in the boomer era. One system trained people to appear successful, the other trained people to be in a right relation and was marginalized or erased. This split intensifies the later generational hunger for authenticity. So, baby boomers were raised inside unprecedented material stability, constant geopolitical threat, rigid moral and gender roles, and a rapidly expanding media environment, training their nervous systems to seek safety through structure, authority, productivity, conformity, and the external validation rather than internal regulation. When authority later failed and structure cracked, the generation that had been trained to perform stability rather than process emotion passed unresolved tension forward instead of metabolizing it. All right, we finally made it. Part 2, internal imprint. So, we are getting into the astrology. If you're not into that jam, first of all, I have no freaking clue why you are on my channel. Astro-Psychological, indigenous, hermetic channel of mine. I am going to stretch out and take a coffee break. I've been recording for 2 hours and 5 minutes already. Alrighty. Gosh, that's good stuff. Got collagen protein powder, mushroom extract, multiple, like 5 different mushrooms. Oh, can't remember what the other thing is. Minerals of some sort. Okay, so let's see if you can see this pretty well. Yep, good. All right, good deal. All right, so part 2, internal imprint. All right, I'll get myself adjusted here. Okay, so the internal imprint, how the world wired the nervous system. I'm going to start having people drive by. It's almost 6:30 in the morning, and I've got my big bay door open. Sunshine will be coming up in about an hour, hour and a half, so that'll be fun. All right, so how that world wired the nervous system. Astrology, polarity, Chiron, Earth, loss, and embodiment. So, Pluto represents what couldn't be avoided collectively within this generation. Collective trauma, power field. Neptune represents how people escaped or numbed. Disassociation, idealization, spiritualization. Uranus represents what destabilized safety, shock, disruption, unpredictability. Chiron, ooh, that didn't work. I thought that would work, but it definitely, oh no, where'd it take me? Huh. All right, not going to do that again. Chiron represents where identity fractured, worth, safety, visibility, and usefulness. Earth represents what was lost semantically, embodiment, pleasure, and regulation. So I'm not saying astrology caused history. I'm showing how astrology describes the internal cost of living through it. So I'm separating this into 2 parts on purpose. First, what happened in the world, then what happened inside people because of it. History tells us what happened. Astrology shows us at what cost. And also because I absolutely love cross-referencing different systems and cross-referencing dates and history with astrology of where the planets were in that time frame is a great way to cross-reference information. So, all right, layer 1, structural, external, slow, collective, inescapable. So Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus are the outer planets. And if you get on, oh gosh, what's that? app called Stephen Burns uses it. What is it? This is gonna drive me insane. Solar system, what do they call it? Solar system scope. If you get on the solar system scope, they claim that Pluto has been demoted as a planet. But yeah, I'm not subscribing to that. It's just hilarious because Stephen Burns, he starts ranting and raving about Pluto, and he's a geophysicist. It's absolutely hysterical. So, anyways, I incorporate it into my teachings, obviously, because it's actually extremely powerful, even though it's far out and small. All right, so I see more people are joining, and I am in my astrological portion of the baby boomers. I went over history already in the first 2 hours and 5 minutes. I went over the huge landscape through 9 different pillars of history. So, politics, economics, religion, music, you name it. So, now we are getting into the astrological cross-referencing portion of the baby boomers. All right, so the structural external layer, which is Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus, these define what happened to a generation regardless of individual personality. So, Pluto answers what collapsed or traumatized the system. Neptune represents how reality was distorted, idealized, or escaped. Uranus represents what destabilized the old order and forced change. So these planets, the outer planets, move slowly, span many years, affect entire populations at once, describe historical pressure, not coping style. So the coping internal style is represented in the asteroid layer, which I only know of probably three or four. I actually have a list. 3 or 4 of the very elder astrologers get into asteroids, especially generationally. I actually don't know a single astrologer on YouTube that gets into the asteroids generationally. I actually don't. If you do, please comment below because I am extremely curious, honestly. I'm the only one that I know of so far. So, this is the skeleton of the era. It's a little chilly. It's driving my throat nuts. All right, layer 2 in the internal layer. Internal realm. Wound represents the wound internalization. So this is a medium speed semi-generational. Chiron, the centaur. Chiron is narrower than the asteroids, but not as narrow as personal planets. Chiron answers, where did the generation internalize pain? What part of existence feels unsafe? What question haunted identity? Key distinctions: Chiron clusters by generation, but does not cover every sign cleanly. Yes, I sat on this for a while. I've studied research relentlessly, cross-referencing, trying to get the exact dates of where the heck Chiron and the planets were, and so I finally nailed it, and I am thankfully giving this presentation because I am ready to move on to the next generation. Obviously, I'm most excited about the millennial generation and the alpha generation, but we are where we are. And we have to start it at, the beginning. So, Chiron clusters by generation, but does not cover every sign cleanly. It overlaps generations. It creates a sub cohort and bridge souls. So within one generation, not everyone has the same Chiron sign, but they're circling the same existential wound from different angles. Chiron is the shared ache, not the coping method. Layer 3, adaptation and coping. So these are fast, fractal, personal, within, collective. Asteroids, Ceres, Juno, Vesta, Pallas, and Lilith. Asteroids answer, how did people survive this internally? How did care, attachment, devotion, sexuality, intelligence, and power get shaped? What strategies did the psyche use to function inside the structure? Why asteroids matter? They cycle through every sign during a generation. They show diverse coping styles under the same pressure. They explain why siblings and peers respond differently to the same era. They are where polarity patterns become personal. Asteroids are the nervous system's workarounds. And you best believe I've gone through every single birth chart that I have and broke them down generationally. It's very interesting. All right, so we need orientation here. You're about to see the same survival strategy appear in different forms. That is the point. If certain ideas appear again and again in different sections, this is intentional. Each repetition is not restating the same point. It is tracing the same adaptive strategy as it expresses through belief, body, relationship, care, morality, and devotion. Survival does not fragment neatly, it echoes. This work follows those echoes across systems so the pattern can finally be seen as whole. You're not circling, you are spiraling inward towards integration. All right, so baby boomers, the generation that confused strength with silence and built a world on it. So I might actually make myself smaller. I have to click transition every single time. That's fascinating. Ah, I see. Well, that makes sense, I guess. That was something I was unaware of. All right. So, back to what I was doing. All right. So, baby boomers, the generation that confused strength with silence and built a world around it. Nervous system baseline. External regulation was absolute. Institutions, roles, authority, and schedules governed survival. The internal system adapted by suppressing ambiguity, privileging endurance, prioritizing stability over truth, and equating survival with compliance. What follows describes the cost of that adaptation. So, for the baby boomer generations, 1946 through 1964, we have Pluto in Leo, July 1939 through August 1957. Virgo, August 1957 through October 1971. So the early boomers have Pluto in Leo, and the late boomers have Pluto in Virgo. Now, actually, I have a list of Paul Chek is a boomer. He is someone that I've studied heavily under. And gosh, who was it? I'm terrible with names. I can remember people's personalities before I can remember names. He's a comedian. My grandma loved him. Actually, I'm just gonna do let me just type in Paul Chek because that's an easier way to find it. I've got like 7,000 notes on my computer. I sat here and broke down all of my everyone I have in my astrology app, my all the birth charts, family, friends, coworkers, grandparents. So Ron White, that's his name. So Ron White is a comedian. I love Ron White actually, and my grandmother loved him. He has Pluto and Virgo, and he has many, many different Chiron in Aquarius, Pallas, Juno, Lilith, Pholos, all in Aquarius. I love it. It makes so much sense. He was like he was a late baby boomer, but he's not a typical expression of a baby boomer because he's like a pressure valve for that generation. And he used his humor, it just really it's hilarious. He's like a misfit boomer. Too awake for rigid hierarchy, too individual for conformity, too honest for politeness. He mocked the system from inside it. And my grandmother was she's from the silent generation. And so she lived with silence and duty and swallowed her emotions. And Ron White gave her something, to listen to. Truth without chaos, just listening. It was hysterical because we would listen to Ron White after going to church. And I was something I'll never forget. All right. So I do want to break down some more, what do you call it? Gosh, I'm losing, lost of word. What do you call it? Famous. Jeez, why can I not think of that word? Famous. I want to break down Ron White's chart, Paul Chek's chart. I'm not obviously going to do family or friends online, but I do want to break down their charts to explain. It really gets you into understanding after, going through the history of the generation, going through the astrological layer of the generation, and then breaking down their chart really, really puts it into perspective. And both of them are still alive, and it's just extremely fascinating to me. So, all right, let's get going here. The internal system adapted by suppressing ambiguity. So I did go through that. All right. So we've got Pluto in Leo for the early boomers, and late boomers, we have Pluto in Virgo. And you can track this. It's just. All right. So Pluto in Leo boomers, identity pressure, visibility, performance, loyalty, power through charisma and hierarchy. Pluto and Virgo boomers, worth through usefulness, discipline, labor, moral correction, power through productivity and compliance. Pluto equals what couldn't be avoided. Collective trauma, power field. Pluto describes the inescapable pressure of the era, where power was enforced or collapsed, what had to be endured regardless of consent. So this is a layer of survival, domination, loss of control, irreversible transformation. Pluto shows what shaped everyone, even those who thrived. So Pluto, Leo through Virgo. Trauma, authority, worth equals work. Core imprint, ego formation through status and work. Identity tied to productivity and recognition. Pluto theme, Leo, authority, ego, hierarchy, dominance, charismatic leadership. And Virgo, labor, service, efficiency, perfectionism, service as worth. I feel like I bumped I did. All right. So shadow is authoritarian patterns, emotional repression, worth equals usefulness. So translation, identity became fused with role, productivity, status, usefulness. You didn't ask, am I fulfilled? You asked, am I doing my job? And polarity followed that logic. What they got right, and this matters. Boomers understood commitment takes effort, society needs structure, people must contribute, families don't survive chaos. They built infrastructure, they created continuity, they stabilized a wounded world. That deserves respect. Where it broke down. But here's the fracture point. They confused emotional suppression with strength. They confused endurance with intimacy, and they confused authority with leadership. And because emotion wasn't integrated, it leaked sideways into control, into addiction, into affairs, into a silent resentment, and into rigid gender expectations. All right, so where am I at? Gender expectations. I feel like I pushed something. There it is. All right. So Pluto, what couldn't be avoided? Collective pressure field, not psychology. So Pluto and Leo, boomers, 1939 through 1957, identity under authority. This cohort was shaped by a power field that demanded visibility, loyalty, coherence of image, and alignment with dominant leadership. Power was centralized and personal. It lived with figures, institutions, and symbols that could not be questioned without consequence. Nervous system training, identity must be legible and impressive. Belonging depends on loyalty and authority. To authority, being seen as both reward and risk. Shame follows public failure. Even those who succeed internalized fear of humiliation, fear of loss, losing status, fear of falling out of favor. The self became something to manage, not inhabit. Structural cost, authenticity subordinated to performance, inner truth deferred to outer approval. Pluto and Virgo boomers, 1957 through 1971, so later boomers. Worth under utility. This cohort inherited a different pressure field. Productivity over personality, usefulness over visibility, discipline over expression, moral correction over charisma. Power was no longer about being admired. It was about being necessary. Nervous system training, worth must be earned continuously. Rest requires justification. Bodies are instruments of labor. Errors threaten survival. Control moved inward. Self monitoring, self critique, and internalized authority. Structural cost, chronic anxiety through adequacy, selfhood collapse into function. So the polarity cost, boomer polarity worked structurally, but it failed relationally. Masculine energy became distant, authoritarian, emotionally unavailable. Feminine energy became depleted, resentful, unseen, and overextended. Love stayed together, but intimacy didn't always survive. The baby boomers inherited survival, silence, and turned it into social order. Their polarity blueprint was clear, rigid, and functional. Men led and provide, and women support and endure. What they built lasted, what they repressed did not. And the emotional cost of the repression is what later generations are still unpacking. Boomers, the authoritarian echo, rigid rules to rebellion. Primary wound, overly rigid masculine structures. So themes, patriarchy, silence culture, and emotional repression. Result, passed on trauma patterns, both by enforcing and rejecting them. Boomers inherited a rigid masculine framework that punished emotion, rewarded providing only, restricted feminine expression, and enforced hierarchy. The wound here is oppression, not collapse. Boomers enforced some of the trauma millennials and Gen Zs inherited. Later, but they did not experience the digital or economic fractures that came later. Why Pluto matters so much in relationships. And this is really fascinating because, it's taken me years and years and years and years to understand this. So you're welcome. Probably won't find this anywhere else. It just comes from years of study. And honestly, I really actually, when I first tuned into this, it was my last relationship. I will not lie. This is extremely important in relationships, certainly. All right. So, why Pluto matters so much in relationships. You're probably not going to hear this anywhere else. I keep saying that, but it's true. All right. So, Pluto doesn't describe attraction. It just Let's not turn the mic off. So Pluto doesn't describe attraction. It describes what cannot stay unconscious once two nervous systems are entangled. Relationships are one of the primary arenas where power becomes intimate, survival strategies get activated, and inherited patterns surface without permission. Pluto shows up there whether people want it to or not. What Pluto actually governs relationally. Take notes. All right. So, where control replaces safety, where attachment masks fear of loss, where intimacy threatens identity, where old survival contracts override present consent. It's not about obsession, it's about what feels existentially loaded. Anything that triggers, if this breaks, something in me breaks. I can't lose this without losing myself. I have to manage this person's response to stay intact. That's Pluto. Pluto versus love. Important distinction. Love says, I choose you. Pluto asks, what part of me is activated beyond choice here? That can be bonding, fear, loyalty, trauma memory, ancestral patterning, unfinished business. Pluto doesn't mean the relationship is bad. It means it's revealing something fundamental. Why Pluto gets mistaken for chemistry. Intensity feels like connection until it doesn't. Pluto-driven bonds often include magnetism, high emotional charge, difficulty in disengaging, deep transformation, wanted or not. But the key is always this is mutual transformation or mutual reenactment. Pluto without consciousness repeats, Pluto with consciousness integrates. We're mapping what gets passed down unconsciously, how survival strategies masquerade as love, how endurance gets mistaken for commitment. Pluto is a planet that exposes where we are still living someone else's unfinished story inside our relationships. That's why it matters so much, not because it's dramatic, but because it's honest. So, the clean takeaway here, Pluto in relationships isn't about intensity for its own sake. It's about power becoming visible, unconscious contracts surfacing, inherited survival patterns demanding resolution. Once you see that, you stop asking, why does this feel so big? And start asking, what is being revealed that can't be avoided? That's when Pluto stops running the relationships and starts informing it. So, boomers, provider, patriarchy, and silent feminine. Core polarity imprint. So now we're really going to start getting into polarity, which is pretty much my favorite portion, to be honest, because I love understanding power structures systematically, and that certainly includes polarity when it's unintegrated. All right, so all right, so we have core polarity imprint, hierarchy based bonding. Give me 1 second. I got to clear my nose. I had to do that the country way. All right, now I feel better. Okay, so masculine ideal, provide, protect, lead, don't feel. Feminine ideal, support, endure. And keeping the home running, don't disrupt. Love, traditionally, fight through dominance or withdrawal. Patterns, control, compliance. Need, emotional literacy, and relational flexibility. Language, the world changed. You don't have to fight the new era. Strength includes emotional intelligence. So somewhere my I probably made it worse. I can't oh, there we go. I got it. Okay, so framework, rigidity, flexibility, emotional learning, and relational healings. All right, so real life polarity dynamics. Dating, selection, he chooses a wife, she got chosen. Courtship is about readiness, job, house, reputation, church, community approval, conflict style, dominate or withdraw. The masculine often ends the argument with authority, silence, or shutdown. The feminine often keeps the peace by swallowing needs. Labor split, very clear roles. He's the outside world, she's the inside world. Even if she worked, she still carried the home. Sex and intimacy, duty coded. Sex can be treated as marital maintenance more than mutual emotional attunement. Attachment, loyalty, emotional compatibility. Over emotional compatibility, people stayed because leaving was shamed. Poverty risk, social exile, or moral failure. So the toxic polarity pattern here with the Pluto Leo and Pluto Virgo in the baby boomer generation. Masculine shadow, control, entitlement, emotional illiteracy. Feminine shadow, self erasure, resentment, and indirect communication. So the integrated upgrade, the Aquarian shift. The healthiest boomer couples are the ones who learned strength includes repair, authority includes tenderness, loyalty includes accountability. Boomers didn't lose polarity, they had it, but it often came with a price tag, which was silence. All right, so boomers 1946 through 1964. So I don't know why my spacing is so off. I had it perfect when I started. All right, so Neptune represents how reality was softened and or escaped. So for the baby boomers, we had Neptune in Libra, which was October 1942 through August of 1957. Neptune in Scorpio, August 1957 through October 1970. I'm just sitting here laughing because I did quite a lot of research on this, and I know that there are people out here that are extremely interested in this, and so I am hoping they get on here. And keyboard warriors, I just hope so, because let's go. Let's rock and roll. All right. I'm an Aries rising, so I am not I'm totally I just love this stuff. So, all right. So application to boomers. So the early boomers have Neptune in Libra, mid to late boomers, Neptune in Scorpio. So Libra represents harmony, idealized partnership, keeping the peace. Scorpio represents secrecy, emotional containment, taboo material pushed underground. So Neptune represents how people escaped or numbed, disassociation, idealization, and spiritualization. Neptune describes how reality became blurred or softened, where truth was replaced with ideals, how people avoided pain without addressing it. This includes religion as refuge, romance as illusion, substances, fantasy, and denial, and keeping the peace instead of telling the truth. I'm just sitting here trying to remember Ron White. Where was his Neptune? I don't think I actually wrote it down in my notes. I didn't put Neptune in here. I'm just kind of curious where Ron White's Neptune. I'm going to break their charts down in a separate video because this one has been running on long. So this includes, okay, so I went through that. Keeping the peace instead of the telling the truth. Neptune shows how suffering was anesthetized. That's a rough word. Neptune, Libra through Scorpio, don't rock the boat. Disassociation pattern, harmony over truth. sexual emotional repression, power hidden under politeness. I'm just going to go through and make edits as I go per normal, but now you can actually see me do it. Totally fine. This book will be on my website as soon as I get this video uploaded. All right, so Neptune and Libra boomers, 1947 through 1957. Harmony as the anesthesia. Reality was softened through idealized partnership, gender roles as stabilizers, politeness replacing honesty, and moral order masking emotional absence. Nervous system strategy, conflict avoidance equals safety. Discomfort must be soothed over. Peace is maintained, not examined. Pain was not processed, it was socially contained. So the cost was emotional ambiguity, truth deferred for the sake of appearance. Neptune and Scorpio, so the later boomers, secrecy as survival. As cracks appeared, Neptune moved underground. Reality was softened through silence, taboo containment, emotional privatization, substances, compulsions, and denial. So the nervous system strategy, don't speak what destabilizes, hold pain quietly, protect the system at all costs. So the cost is generational secrecy, unspoken grief transmitted rather than resolved. Yeah, my spacing. I don't know what I clicked before I started this video, but yeah, this is gonna drive me nuts. There we go. I spend so much time getting that actually right, and now that I'm live, it decided to somehow not be. All right, anywho. Uranus, what destabilized safety? Application to boomers. So Uranus is it changes signs. It's one of those planets that it really took me a while to nail down these dates. So online keyboard warriors, please come out and headbutt if you want to. I'm down for that. So application to boomers. So we had Uranus and Gemini through Virgo. The dates are there. If I'm going to keep it here for a second, you can screenshot it, write it down, compare to your own notes if you would like to. So this explains why boomers do not share one Uranus shock style. Some experienced instability via information and communication, some via family and home, some via identity and authority, some via work and health systems. Uranus diversifies this generation. So Uranus represents what destabilized safety, shock, disruption, and unpredictability. Uranus describes sudden breaks in stability, generational nervous system shock, what made the world feel unreliable or volatile. This includes rapid social change, technological disruption, family instability, and emotional unpredictability. Uranus shows why trust is continuity was broken. Gee whiz. Uranus, Gemini through Virgo, disruption pattern. Family structures destabilize, masculine ego inflation to compensate. Nervous system rewired for productivity, efficiency, information, not emotional attunement. I'm going to start freaking out about this spacing because I can't handle it. There we go. All right, so Uranus, what destabilized safety? I think I can move this up one more. This is ridiculous. I had this perfect. All right. Diversifier, not unifier. And I am a perfectionist, so I am congratulating myself right now because this is live and we're doing the thing. All right, so Uranus did not hit boomers uniformly. It fractured experience by domain. So, Uranus and Gemini, instability through information, language, contradiction, rapidly changing narratives, early exposure to mixed messages, and cognitive dissonance. So, 1948 was when the assassinations happened of what page am I on? Hang on a second. Oh, I've got my phone here. I keep forgetting that I can use my phone. I don't want to get this wrong, and I'm terrible with names. Who was assassinated? What was that under? Politics? All right, so we have Uranus and Gemini. So in 1963, okay, so that's later. So that was Uranus and Virgo. That's interesting. I haven't actually see assassination of JFK. All right, so I just wanted to check something myself. All right, so Uranus and Gemini, early exposure to mixed messages and cognitive dissonance. So I'm going to do a little bit more cross referencing because it's very fascinating. So Uranus in Cancer, instability through home, family structure, emotional safety, domestic continuity. Security looked solid but felt unreliable. In Leo, authority figures, identity, leadership, cultural icons. I've been filming for almost 3 hours. I'm going to start getting goofy. All right, so power structures become unpredictable and performative. Uranus and Virgo. We've got work systems, health, routine. I need to get a hold of myself. Uh-oh. There we go. This is so much fun. This is my first presentation on this like OBS studio. It's absolute chaos. All right, so that's the Uranus placement. Stored impact across all Uranus placements. Hypervigilance, delayed rebellion. Shock absorbed without language. I'm gonna power through this because I have multiple other videos to do here, and this spacing out is just wild. All right, so Chiron is not a clean generational planet like Pluto. Chiron's orbit period is 50 through 51 years, but time per sign is 2 to 5 years. Movement is highly irregular. It has an eccentric orbit and retrogrades. Chiron's orbit is irregular, elliptical, and retrograde heavy, which means it overlaps generations, it backtracks, it plants future wounds early, it does not respect neat date boxes. So boomers do not have one Chiron sign, they have a spectrum. Chiron is narrower than asteroids, but broader than people assume. It creates bands, not a single sign. Asteroids truly fan out across all signs. So, the hierarchy. So, we have Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus is the structural field in generations. Chiron is the core wound bands. And asteroids, individual coping strategies. So Chiron, I have noticed, I'm going to pull up my Chiron is actually more uniform, at least according to the birth charts that I have. The asteroids are all over the place, individually in the birth charts, but I've noticed that, you know, a lot of people have this thing. Like, I have a lot of Chiron and Aquarius, actually, for the baby boomers. It's fascinating. That's okay, the wounding in identity. So I'm gonna break this down more. It's just something that I've noticed. All right, so that's why two boomers can share Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus have different Chiron wounds. and radically different asteroid survival styles, and yet still feel like the same generation. This is systems thinking, not rigidity. So I'm separating history from psychology and pressure from adaptation. And yes, I'm going to be editing live, which I don't understand how it is so off. It's just what it's going to stay at this point. I'm on page 72. All right, this book, I always want get into a book, writing a book, and then I'm like, "Oh, this book is only gonna be 10 pages long," or whatever the case may be. I knew this one wasn't gonna be 10 pages long, but it always turns out to be a lot longer. Crazy wild. Oh, so all right. So Chiron, the core wound each generation carries. Can I exist as myself? So Chiron is where identity fractured, the quiet wound, not the loud one. Chiron equals where identity fractured, worth, safety, visibility, and usefulness. This is not necessarily personality like the ego sun sign in Mercury or Mars or Venus. It is shame around existence, conditional worth, identity tied to role, approval, or usefulness. Chiron shows what hurt most quietly and what later generations try to heal. So, Chiron is certainly you do pass down through your family lines. Chiron wounds, that's a huge one. Chiron in Libra for the boomers. I am valued when I am agreeable. Identity tied to approval, relationship, harmony, and being chosen. Selfhood bends towards others. Chiron in Scorpio. Yeah, for some reason there's the spacing is absolutely crazy. So Chiron in Scorpio, it is dangerous to be emotionally exposed. Identity tied to control, secrecy, self-protection, unspoken pain. Truth becomes hazardous. Chiron in Sagittarius. My worth depends on being right, faithful, or certain. Identity tied to belief, ideology, moral frameworks, meaning systems. Doubt becomes destabilizing. Why this matters structurally. Boomers did not fail to integrate. Integration was not available. They were trained to endure, maintain, comply, and stabilize collapsing systems. What they passed down was not wisdom, it was unfinished adaptation. This is not blame, it is lineage mechanics. So, Earth, now we're going to get into Earth. What was lost somatically, which we learned a lot about in the indigenous portions and each pillar in the external history portion. So Pluto, I'm sorry. Okay, so what was lost semantically? Embodiment, pleasure, and regulation. So overall, Pluto represents structural trauma. Chiron represents identity injury. Earth represents repair, and the asteroids represents relational survival strategies. Earth represents the body's lived experience, grounding, rhythm, and sensation. Safety in being alive, not just productive. Earth loss shows up as disconnection from the body, guilt around rest or pleasure, nervous systems trained for endurance, not regulation. Earth shows what survival demanded people give up physically. Now, in your individual chart, in order to know, I know like astrologers, if you want to know what your earth sign is, it is the exact opposite of your sun sign. So take your sun sign. Mine is Pisces at the 11th degree. So my earth is in Virgo at the 11th degree. And earth is a huge grounding to your ego. And also, it's very important to look into your north node and south node. And it's really wild because my north node is also Pisces and my south node is Virgo. So it's very fascinating. But earth is the opposite of your ego, sun sign, and that is what grounds you. Earth loss shows up as disconnection from the body, guilt around rest or pleasure, nervous systems trained for endurance, not regulation. Earth shows what survival demanded people give up physically. Earth loss, bodies disciplined, not honored. Emotion suppressed to maintain order. Earth repair needed. Emotional literacy. Feeling without shame and flexibility over control. So, going deeper, what earth loss actually means. Earth loss is not people didn't feel enough. It is the body was converted from a sensing organism into a survival instrument. That is the core. All right. So, for boomers, yep, I don't know why it's the same spot. For boomers, the body became something to discipline, override, delay, and exhaust in a service of order. What was trained out of the body, not emotion feedback, specifically hunger as information, fatigue as boundary, pleasure as regulation, and sensation as orientation. The nervous system learned ignore the body to keep the system stable. That's not disassociation as pathology, that's functional suppression. Why endurance is the right word and regulation is the repair. Endurance equals tolerant load without collapse. Regulation is distribute load so recovery is possible. Boomers were trained for endurance, which means stress without discharge, effort without rhythm, responsibility without replenishment. So, earth loss is not fragility, it's overfunctioning at the body's expense. What earth repair actually requires and what it does not. I'm like hardcore editing right now. I apologize. Sorry, not sorry. All right. So, earth repair does not mean indulgence, comfort seeking, softness without structure, abandoning responsibility. That would violate Capricorn integrity, and you don't do that. Earth repair does mean restoring sensory feedback loops, allowing the body to inform decisions again, reintroducing rhythm instead of constant override, letting sensation exist without moral judgment. Earth repair needed. Emotional literacy, feeling without shame, flexibility over control. The body must be allowed to speak again without punishment. That is repair. So, earth is what was lost somatically, embodiment, pleasure, and regulation. Earth represents the body's lived experience, rhythm, sensation, and physical orientation. Safety in being alive, not just useful. Earth loss shows up as disconnection from bodily feedback, guilt around rest, pleasure, or ease. Nervous systems trained for endurance rather than regulation. The body was disciplined to maintain order, not honored as a source of information. Survival required overriding sensation, and the cost was embodiment. Earth shows what history demanded people give up physically in order to function. So, earth loss, we have bodies treated as instruments, not homes, sensation subordinated to duty, emotion suppressed to preserve stability, earth repair required, restoring sensory feedback without shame, feeling without immediate correction, rhythm and flexibility over constant control. Without earth repair, meaning overworks, compassion overextends, and structure hardens. With earth repair, everything else can soften without falling apart. All right, this is the final layer, asteroids as a system. Let's take a drink break. I think this is my longest video ever, and it's live. My endurance has certainly gone up pretty high, which is awesome. All right, so asteroids as a system. So I didn't study into asteroids until 3-Eye Atlas was a thing in our collective. And so I have to give a shout out where the shout out is due. So, asteroids as a system. Everyone asked what 3-Eye Atlas was. Almost no one asked what it changed. For a moment, humanity tracked something fast, foreign, and unbound by our usual cycles. Without realizing it, we recalibrated how we think about influence. Not everything that shapes us moves slowly like Pluto. Some things move just fast enough to shape behavior, not eras. That's where asteroids live. They don't rule civilizations, they shape nervous systems, attachment, burnout, care, boundaries, and survival strategies. The Aquarian age isn't about belief or hierarchy. It's about systems that regulate in real time. Planets show us power. I gotta clear my throat. All right, so planets show us power, asteroids show us how humans learn to survive inside it. So, the scale shift principle asteroids don't complicate astrology, they restore scale. Outer planets, what broke in civilization. Inner planets, how we feel day to day. And asteroids, how the nervous system adapted to survive. Asteroids sit in the mid zone. Mid speed zone, too fast to be fate, too slow to be move, exactly right to wire behavior. That's why entire generations share burnout patterns, relationship wounds cluster by age. People repeat the same dynamics even when they know better because knowledge doesn't rewire survival, repair does. Asteroids pass through, they leave a pattern, they don't dominate, they imprint. Imprint. Just like trauma, attachment, care, devotion, and identity defense. Why asteroids were ignored. Anyone in the class? Raise your hand if you know why the asteroids were ignored. Take a guess. Take a wild guess. It's not very hard to get. Older older astrology, older ass astrology was built for hierarchy. Asteroids don't support hierarchy. They expose where care was exploited, where devotion was coerced, and where truth was punished. That's why they feel uncomfortable. They don't flatter the ego, they go straight to the body. And that's why they matter now. Pluto tells us what collapsed, asteroids tell us how humans adapted, and Earth tells us how to repair it. Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus describe the structure. Chiron describes the wound. The asteroids describe how people learned to survive inside it. Asteroids move faster than outer planets, cycle through every sign within a generation, explain diversity of coping styles under the same pressure. This is why people from the same generation behave very differently, yet carry the same underlying tension. Asteroids are adaptation, not cause. Astrology doesn't explain why history happened. It explains what history did to the human nervous system. Yes, I have traffic driving by. And the road is wet, so it's extra loud. It's actually really warm for it being Christmas. I forgot my watch inside. It's pretty warm. It's really wild. All right. So, so asteroids, meaning, mercy, and structure all fail when the body is treated as expendable. Asteroids, why is that spelled wrong? Asteroids show how people learn to survive inside the larger pressure field. For baby boomers, adaptation required sacrificing mutual care, chosen commitment, intuitive intelligence, embodied sexuality, and rest in service of stability. These were not moral failures, they were survival strategies that worked at a cost. The Boomer asteroid pattern distilled. So, this is actually a pretty small section. I am introducing the asteroids because absolutely no one that I know of, and I'm very in tune, like, with I network a lot, so I like to have an eagle's eye view of what people are doing, especially the elder professionals. And I don't know any of them that are doing this, so I am keeping this lighter than I prefer. Obviously, I'm on like page 90 already. This is like a briefer introduction, and also this is very personal to an individual. And I'm just trying to help you crack the door open. So, the nervous system learned care, commitment, devotion, intelligence, and truth must all serve stability, not the self. So, each asteroid shows a different sacrifice point. All right, cool. It lines up pretty good. All right, so Cirrus, mutual nourishment, what was sacrificed and why. Care had to keep the system running. Juno, choice in commitment and stability over intimacy. Vesta, what was sacrificed, a life force and selfhood. Why someone had to hold the structure. Pallas, what was sacrificed, intuition and insight because hierarchy needed obedience. Lilith, emotional and sexual truth was sacrificed for expression, threatened order. And Chiron, intrinsic worth was sacrificed for survival, required usefulness. All right, so the nervous system pattern, control or comply, feelings delayed or buried. Common asteroid signatures. Lilith, suppressed emotion and sexuality. Pallas, feminine intelligence dismissed. Cirrus, care as duty. Integration needed. Emotional literacy, permission to feel, and flexibility. Very rigid generation. So this is an overall asteroid adaptation. This is overall, and then I'm going to briefly break down what each asteroid represents. I have many books and many apps, and they are not broken down really in depth anywhere. Yeah, so asteroid adaptation. So Cirrus, care equals sacrifice. Juno, marriage equals ownership and duty. Vesta, burnout normalized. Lilith, sexuality plus emotion repressed. Pallas, intuition dismissed. Chiron, my worth is what I provide. Nervous system pattern, control or comply. Feelings delayed or buried. All right, so what does Cirrus represent? How care was learned, nourishment versus depletion. And you can also put the asteroids on an axis. Dual, so you've got two asteroids on an axis. I am not going to break that down here. I will make that its own separate video. But yeah, it's quite amazing to look at your own chart through the axis of your asteroids. I just don't know anyone else doing this. So, Cirrus describes how people learn to give and receive care, whether nourishment was conditioned or mutual. Distortions include care as duty, self sacrifice as love, burnout normalized, needs postponed indefinitely. Cirrus shows how survival redefined nurturing. So, care equals obligation, mothering equals sacrifice. Am I supported while existing is the question. So, Juno, how commitment was structured, contracts, marriage, and loyalty. Juno describes how partnership functioned, whether commitment was chosen or enforced. This includes marriage as obligation, loyalty prioritized over intimacy, endurance valued over compatibility. Juno shows how relationships were stabilized, often at emotional costs. So, boomers, marriage as duty and ownership. Am I choosing or trapped? Is the question. Vesta, where life force was devoted, focus, sacrifice, and burnout. Can anyone guess where my Vesta is? Fire sign, Sagittarius. Yeah, it's funny. Vesta describes what people gave their energy to unquestioningly, where devotion replaced selfhood. This includes work, family, institution, and survival roles. Vesta shows where people burned themselves out to keep the system running. So, what receives my life force is the question here. And for boomers, devotion to work, family at cost of self. Palace, how intelligence was allowed, pattern recognition, intuition, and strategy. Palace describes whether institution and pattern awareness were trusted, how problem solving was valued. Distortions include hierarchy overriding wisdom. Institution dismissed. Gosh, I'm gonna have to do some editing here. It wasn't like this when I started. I'm not really sure why. I am just going to quickly see where I'm at here. I need one more. Great. All right, there. So distortions include hierarchy overriding wisdom, and intuition dismissed, emotional intelligence undervalued. Palace shows whether insight was welcomed or suppressed. So Palace's question, can I see clearly and trust it? Boomers, intuition suppressed by hierarchy. Lilith represents what was rejected or punished, truth, sexuality, anger, and refusal. Lilith describes what parts of humanity were exiled. Which expressions were deemed unacceptable? This includes emotional honesty, sexual autonomy, rage, refusal, and grief, non-compliance. Lilith shows what had to be hidden to belong. So Lilith represents rejected truth. The question is, what part of me was punished? Boomers, generation, sexuality, and emotions repressed. All right, so this is the very last page, I believe. As I scroll down through 20 more pages. All right, just kidding. All right, part 3. I have got to get this on its own page. I won't survive if I don't. Why is it not showing me the page? Oops. All right, one moment. I gotta view. I'm not sure. Like, I literally sent this book to myself on my phone and it looks just fine. And now all of a sudden it's being all haywire. Something was reformatted somehow. I'm not really sure. Yeah, see, look at that. It has to do with the headings. That's what it is. Huh, that's interesting. I wonder why. Heading. I'm gonna have to figure that one out later. What page am I on? 84. All right, note to self. All right, note to self. Terrible. All right, so that one's really gonna have to be changed. All right, so what they passed down. All right, so we're in the last transmission, part 3, very last. So what they passed down, what did the baby boomer generation, 1946 through 1964, what did they pass down without meaning to is the big question. All right, so transmission is not intention, so they did not intentionally. Transmission is what happens when a nervous system trains a child through repetition, omission, and reward structure. Boomers did not ruin anything. They transmitted what they had to become in order to function inside the world they inherited. The question is, what did daily life train their nervous system to expect and therefore teach? So, number one, the core transmission, external regulation as love. Boomers learn stability through institutions, roles, schedules, authority, and duty. So they transmitted if you are aligned with the system, you are safe. This becomes be good, don't cause problems, follow the rules, respect authority, and keep it together. Love becomes conditional on a coherence with the structure, not because they were cold, but incoherence was dangerous. Number two, worth transmission. Usefulness equals belonging. So from Pluto, Leo to Virgo, performance to productivity. They taught your value is what you provide. This transmits as overfunctioning, hyper responsibility, guilt when resting, identity fused to output, emotional needs treated as extra. Kids learned early needs without usefulness feel risky. Emotion number three, emotion transmission. Feeling is a liability. They weren't trained to process emotion. They were trained to delay it. So the child receives comfort through correction, anxiety met with instruction, grief met with be strong, anger met with punishment or shame. Huge, huge. Translation, feel later, perform now. This is not emotional abuse by default. It's a survival technology, but it creates a downstream cost. Adult children who can function but cannot metabolize experience. And number four, earth loss transmission, the body as an instrument. This is the quiet one. Boomers pass down that the body is something to override, something to discipline, something to exhaust for the mission. So kids inherit chronic self abandonment, guilt around pleasure, rest must be earned, sensation ignored until crisis. This is endurance culture, not fragility over functioning. And number five, relationship transmission, loyalty over intimacy. Through Juno, Sirius, and Vesta, commitment was stabilized as duty, ownership, and sacrifice. So children learn staying is what love means, and compatibility is secondary. Needs are negotiable, leaving is shameful, family can override selfhood. This becomes a template Gen X and millennials either replicate unconsciously or reject completely. Number six, truth transmission, harmony over clarity. Through Neptune, Libra, and Scorpio dynamics, they inherited two survival rules. Keep the peace with Libra and keep it contained, Scorpio. So the child learns don't name what disrupts the family image, don't expose what can't be fixed, don't make conflict visible. Boy, do I see this one in someone I know. Oh, yes. Oh gosh, I can't stand it. Sorry. Geez, that to me is fake. So this creates high social functionality, low emotional transparency. But I get it, but I don't. It also creates the later generation obsession with truth. Raise the roof, millennials. Freaking obsessed with truth. Thank you. Because truth was not safe at home. All right, intelligence transmission. Hierarchy overrides insight. Through palace suppression, they transmitted don't outsmart the structure. Dun dun dun. Children learn intuition is not credible without permission. Pattern recognition is threatening. Questioning authority equals disrespect. This creates two downstream reactions. Gen X cynicism, I trust nothing. Millennial over analysis, I must prove everything. Number 8, the polarity transmission. All right, so I'm having actually there we go. Boomer polarity was role-based. Masculine equals authority, direction, and control. Feminine represents support, adaptation, and self-erasure. So the child inherits masculinity without embodiment, role instead of center. Femininity without sovereignty, service instead of self. This is why later generations don't change dating. They change the entire architecture of consent. Boomers pass down the nervous system belief that safety comes from external regulation, roles, duty, productivity, loyalty, and emotional containment. They taught worth as usefulness, love as endurance, and stability as the highest good. This was not moral failure, it was functional adaptation. But the downstream cost was embodiment loss, emotional delay, and relationships stabilized through obligation instead of mutual regulation. Later generations aren't rebelling against boomers, they're trying to metabolize what boomers had to suppress in order to survive. What they called strength, we now recognize as endurance without discharge. This is not blame, it's lineage mechanics. We are at the end, y'all. 89. All right. Page 89. I've got 89. Should I put my disclaimer on here? I'm just kidding. I already put that in my description. All right. 89 pages, y'all. It took me 3.5 hours almost, which I really didn't think it would be that long going into it. Certainly here for it, though. All right. So that is my generation video. I am going to put myself on the screen real quick. All right, the sun is slowly coming out. I got a 3.5. This is my longest video I've ever made. Amazing. So I now am going to upload this book on my website. It will be available for purchase. I do not have any more discounts going on. I ran a 33% discount and just until December 21st. And so now my books are at full price. This length of a book, I will probably charge $11 or so. Tons and tons of research, many hours went into this. I certainly want to do video format for those that are too impatient or do not have enough time to read. I understand that. I love both video and books. So certainly check out my books in the description below. I also have Underwater Panther apparel. I have stickers. I have t-shirts, sweaters, computer cases, you name it. So check all that out. Certainly feel free to comment in the uh, comment section below your thoughts and feelings on a video presentation like you've never seen before. This is exciting. I'm such a pioneer. I'm an Aries rising. I certainly am not afraid of literally being the first to walk a path. That is just who I am. I don't need a beaten path to walk down at all. By any stretch of the imagination, I am very pioneering. I come from a family full of pioneers, and that is just my spirit. So, anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video, the baby boomer generation, and I certainly am going to be moving on to the next generation. Let me pull up my Oh, yeah. Actually, my next video, I am going to break down Paul Chek's birth chart and Ron White's birth chart. So I love them both. I studied under Paul Chek at the uh, Chek Institute. And yeah, I had to get my certifications. I do plan on continuing that education. He is a boomer that is like Ron White in his own right. They are both amazing products of the baby boomer generation, and they're getting older, and it's so freaking sad. It is so sad. All right, y'all, I'm gonna get off here and upload my book, and like and subscribe, and I will see you on the other side if I can figure out how to stop streaming. That's another thing I haven't even thought about yet. So